Snow drifts across your path in a slow, lazy tumble, as if the sky itself is too drowsy to be bothered with urgency. You trudge through the quiet, your boots sinking into a white so pristine you feel like you're disturbing something ancient. The snow isn't just cold, it's a kind of hush, a silence thick enough to swallow thought. It clings to your eyelashes, your furs, the tiny hairs along your cheeks. Somewhere behind you, the river froze into a silver ribbon. Weeks ago, and the last sun you saw was low and apologetic, giving up by mid-afternoon. The trees watch you. Not in the metaphorical sense, though you'd be forgiven for feeling that way, but literally with carved wooden eyes nailed to the bark. Someone came this way before you, and someone wanted the forest to remember it. Maybe it was for protection, or a joke, or both. That's the thing out here. Every answer's maybe wrapped in fur and tied with sinew. You pause and listen. Nothing. Not even the birds want to break this winter. Only your breath puffs a brief cloud, vanishing like a thought you meant to hold on to. You don't know exactly where you're headed, north mostly, toward the lights. Not the ones from some cozy village or flickering lodge fire, but the ones that dance above the sky, green, red, blue, sometimes so bright, they cast shadows. The elders call them many things, the sky people, the spirits of the lost, the ghost river. Historians today politely call them aurora borealis and move on. But you're not a historian. You're cold, slightly hungry, and curious in that dangerous way that makes people walk too far into the woods. There's a rhythm to your march, snow crunch, breath puff, heartbeat thud. You get used to it like the tick of a grandfather clock. Except there are no clocks here. Just time measured in how deep your footprints sink, or how long it's been since the last rabbit trail crossed your path. A raven croaks above wings, slicing the air like a dark thought. He lands on a crooked pine and stares beady-eyed. Maybe he's watching. Maybe he's judging. Maybe he's just cold too. Either way, you nod at him. Manners cost nothing even with birds. Your pack is light. Some dried fish flint, a stitched pouch of bear grease, and that small bone amulet you never take off. You didn't make it. It was passed to you, and before that passed again, the way winter stories are whispered from mouth to ear across time. It's warm against your chest, strangely so. You tell yourself it's your body heat. You know you're lying. The trail thickens. Trees lean in conspiratorial. Their branches cradle snow like old hands, gripping secrets. You duck beneath a low-hanging spruce bough and catch a glimpse of the first flicker, faint green shimmering like mist caught in moonlight. The lights are early tonight. You stop. Look. Let them speak. Of course they don't speak in words. Not unless you're the sort who likes to imagine things which you are. You listen anyway. A slow roll of light pulses across the horizon like someone peeling open the sky from behind. It glows green, tinged with a pink shimmer near the edges. There's movement too, not frantic, not hurried. Just a lazy swirl like smoke in reverse. You wonder what the first people thought when they saw this. Not the first to write it down, but the first to look up and feel their heart catch fire. Did they fear it, worship it, blame it on owls? Historians still argue whether the aurora played a direct role in ritual cycles or merely served as cosmic theatre for long winters. The problem, of course, is that lights leave no fossils. Your grandmother used to say the lights were dancing spirits trying to keep warm. That's why they shimmered and shifted, She said they were shaking off the cold of the sky. If they laughed too loud, she'd add, "Cover your ears." Or you might forget your name. You weren't sure if she was joking, which honestly was most of her charm. You keep walking slower now. The lights follow, or maybe you're just headed where they're strongest. The stars above refuse to compete, politely dimming their brilliance. One by one, constellations fade beneath the northern glow. The Milky Way seems almost embarrassed, retreating behind its veil. You crest a ridge, and there it is. A frozen lake, silver like a mirror made for giants. At its edge, a half circle of tents, low and round their hides dusted in snow. Faint curls of smoke rise from each chimney hole, disappearing into the sky like invisible messages. You see shadows move inside. Someone stokes a fire, someone chews meat, someone laughs softly. You've arrived, not at a city, not at a fortress, but at something older, quieter. A winter village held together with sinew and shared stories. You step forward, and just as your foot touches the icy path down, a low hum rolls across the lake. You feel it in your ribs like distant thunder, but there's no storm. It's just the sky, laughing maybe, or whispering. You've only just arrived, but something already knows you're here. The snow softens beneath your feet as you descend toward the lakeside village. The air carries the distinct scent of spruce resin mingled with the faint curl of wood smoke. It smells like warmth, like stories waiting to be told. Behind you, the forest settles. No crunch of footsteps follows. Just your own heartbeat, slightly louder than it needs to be. The tents form a crescent around the frozen lake, like they're shielding it, or perhaps worshipping it. Thick hides of caribou and moose are stretched tight over bone frames, their surfaces patterned with soot stains, and the occasional symbol, drawn in ochre, swirls handprint stars. A few glow faintly from the inside firelight, casting dancing shapes through tiny seams and stitched holes. As you step into the village's outer ring, a dog lifts its head, gives a single, disinterested bark, then flops back onto the snow like it's seen too many travelers to care. One of its ears twitches, that's the most attention you're getting. A man emerges from one of the nearer tents, wrapped in a thick fur cloak, his face barely visible beneath layers of wind-worn skin and frost-stuck lashes. He doesn't speak, just nods, once sharply, then jerks his head toward a smaller tent near the lake's edge. This is how you're welcomed here, with a gesture and a shared understanding that words are for later and only if necessary. You duck into the tent, and at once the world changes. Warmth hits your cheeks like a blessing. The air inside smells of cooked fat, wet leather, and something sweet berries, maybe dried and simmered into a paste. The walls curve around you like the inside of a womb. People sit in a circle, cross-legged, leaning close to a low-burning fire, whose smoke escapes through a clever flap in the ceiling. There are no raised voices, no flurry of greetings, just a few glances, a few nods, and then a voice, low, steady, older than the fire. So, you follow the lights. She's seated directly across from you, hunched but unbowed, her hair grey and braided thick down her back. Her eyes, half hidden in the flickering dark, do not blink much. She gestures for you to sit. You obey, not because you're told, but because everything about her makes you want to listen. She holds a ladle over a small clay pot, simmering in the coals, stirs it once, then taps the edge. The room quiets further. Someone hands you a carved cup filled with a hot broth that tastes of marrow and wild onion. It slides down your throat like comfort incarnate. The lights, she repeats. Some say they are spirits of the unborn. Others say they are warriors long dead, dancing in victory. But my grandmother said they were breath. You tilt your head. Breath of what? She smiles slow and deliberate, like a cat enjoying your confusion. Of the sky itself, breathing in, breathing out. When it breathes out, the lights appear. When it breathes in, they vanish, just like us. You sip your broth again. It doesn't answer anything, but it makes you feel less foolish for asking. Of course, she adds. Others think it's sun fire bouncing off ice dust. Science. Heh. She waves her hand, dismissing the idea like a fly. But tell me this, what does a fire know about dancing? One of the younger villagers chuckles. You realize it's not mockery, just joy. Outside, the wind picks up, briefly rattling the hide walls. The lights continue their slow waltz over the lake. You can almost feel them through the tent, like pressure against your skin. She continues. My grandfather believed the lights were messengers. He said they carried things, names, songs, even regrets from the living to the dead, and back again. If you watch closely, you might see a pattern. Not just movement, but meaning. You think of the swirl you saw earlier like smoke in reverse. Maybe it was just air currents, or maybe it was a sentence half finished. Historians still argue whether northern peoples built whole spiritual systems around the aurora or merely folded them into older beliefs. But what do historians know of hunger, of a fire that won't light, of a child who won't stop coughing? No one speaks. She leans back and lets the silence stretch a kind of wisdom in it. You stare into the fire and wonder what breath from the sky might smell like. Could it be like this tent, smoke, broth, hide, sweat, or something stranger? Maybe it would smell like dreams thawing. Outside, a low hum builds again, not loud, but insistent. The lights must be flaring. You glance at the tent wall and see faint streaks of green pulsing through the seams. The old woman doesn't look. She doesn't need to. You'll stay tonight, she says, not a question. Tomorrow someone will take you hunting. You'll need to see what the lights say when you walk beneath them. You nod. She passes you a small wooden charm carved into the shape of a fish. For the journey, she says. Fish aren't wise, but they survive. And sometimes that's better. Another small chuckle drifts through the tent. Even the fire seems to approve. Later, as you lie down beneath a heap of fur blankets, the warmth of broth in your belly, the fish charm pressed into your palm, you feel the sky breathing. Out, in, out. And somewhere in that rhythm you begin to dream. Morning doesn't exactly arrive in the Yukon winter. It sort of sidles in sheepishly, wearing a faint grey shawl of light. You blink awake beneath layers of fur and stillness, unsure whether you slept for hours or centuries. Around you, the tent has dimmed to a quiet murk. A pot simmers low, attended only by steam. Outside, you hear movement, soft thuds, muffled laughter, the wet hiss of snow scraped from a pelt. No roosters here, no alarm clocks, just the rustle of survival shaking off the frost. You step outside, greeted immediately by the cold. It's not mean-spirited, just thorough. The kind that gets in your bones like an old story, inevitable and deeply personal. Breath leaves your body in slow ghosts, and each inhalation feels like sipping winter straight from the bottle. The lake is now a mirror of clouded sky, its surface rippled slightly where the wind skims across. Fires crackle in the half-buried hearths of the tents, their smoke rising into the blank morning like questions with no clear subject. You walk carefully through the village, the fish charm still tucked in your pouch. Children dart past you in bundled chaos, one shouting something about sky butterflies. You decide not to ask. Best not to interfere with that level of imagination before you've had breakfast. At the edge of the camp, the old woman waits. Her back is to you, but she knows you're there. She always knows. You see the lights last night, she asked. You nod. They shimmered green, like grass on fire. She chuckles deep and gravelly. Good. That means they noticed you. You aren't entirely sure whether that's comforting. She turns and gestures to the young man beside her tall, quiet fur hood, dusted in frost. He'll take you out. South Pines. If you're lucky, you'll see more than deer. He nods at you. Once then begins walking without a word. Typical. You fall in beside him, boots crunching through crusted snow. The village fades behind you as trees gather again, spruce and birch, leaning in like old gossipers draped in icicles. There's a hush in the forest, broken only by the occasional bird flurry or a branch shedding its burden of snow. The man finally speaks. My name is Lulled. You repeat it, careful to shape the syllables, like you're carrying something delicate. He nods, satisfied. You walk quietly. Thanks, you say, unsure if it's a compliment or a warning. The path narrows, winding between trees that appear older than memory. You spot claw marks on a trunk, old, faint, high up. Bear, you ask. He shrugs. Maybe, or just someone pretending to be one. You don't ask for clarification, you're learning. As you walk, he points things out with minimal commentary. A squirrel nest, scat from a hare, tracks that disappear halfway through a snowbank, raven prints maybe, or something playing tricks. You come to a clearing where the snow dips into a small depression ringed with trees that form a near-perfect circle. Lulled raises a hand, signaling stop. You freeze. He crouches and places a hand to the ground. Not dramatically, just thoughtfully, like he's asking permission. Then he stands. Here, he says. This is where she saw them. You blink. Who? He looks up at the sky, where clouds drift lazily, like they're in no hurry to become anything meaningful. The one who spoke to the sky. You wait, but he says nothing else. Classic. Eventually he pulls a strip of dried meat from his pouch and offers you one. You chew in silence, watching steam rise from your hands. The meat is tough, smoked and slightly salty. Not delicious, just necessary. Like all things here. Finally, he adds. She stood right there. Said the lights answered her. You glance at the snow-crusted ground. No monument, no cairn, just a spot like any other made holy by story alone. Do you believe her, you ask? He shrugs. Doesn't matter. She believed herself. A fair point, maybe even a wise one. He kneels again, begins preparing a snare near the edge of the clearing. You watch, offering help where you can, but mostly trying not to mess it up. The trap is simple, twisted cord, bent branch snow, packed just so, efficient, unforgiving. While he works, he talks. She used to come here during storms, said the light spoke loudest when the sky was angry. You glance up. No anger today, just a kind of cosmic boredom. Historians still debate whether shamanic practices were centered on specific aurora events, or if those were coincidences later woven into myth. He doesn't respond, probably because you said the word historians and the forest immediately lost interest. You sit on a fallen log, wiping frost from your sleeves. The wind picks up whispering through the trees in a way that sounds suspiciously like your name. Or maybe you're just hungry again. Before you can ask, Nulok stands suddenly holding a finger to his lips. Then he gestures toward a shadow flitting between the trees, a deer elegant and silent. Its fur blends so well with the forest it looks more like memory than animal. You both freeze, watch, wait, then just like that it's gone. He exhales, nodding. We're not supposed to catch it. Oh, he grins barely, but it's there. That one's a watcher. Tests us, makes sure we remember patience. You nod slowly. The deer, it seems, is part spy, part teacher. As you begin walking again, the light shifts. A thin green ribbon appears in the sky, faint but deliberate. It flickers like a pulse, then spreads, widening into an arch that reaches from one side of the treetops to the other. You and Nulok stop. Neither of you speaks. The aurora glows above a quiet blaze of motionless fire. They're breathing again, he murmurs. You believe it. And though no one's saying anything important, you feel the conversation continuing. Later that night you sit by the lake again. The villagers are gathered in a loose semicircle around the central hearth, faces painted by firelight shadows flickering across their cheeks like soft punctuation marks. The crackling wood speaks its own language, a constant background murmur, never quite silent, never quite demanding. Tonight, stories will be told, not the practical ones, no hunting tricks or weather signs, not even the cautionary kind about getting too close to thin ice or what happens when you forget to thank the bones of your dinner. No, tonight is for the oldest stories, the ones that don't care, whether you believe them or not. They'll slip in, curl up beside you, and stay anyway. A young boy sits cross-legged beside the fire, eyes wide with anticipation. An elder woman to your right taps her drum once, twice, and begins a chant, so low it might be mistaken for wind. It fades as another voice takes over, an older man with a laugh like falling logs and hands that look carved from antler. He starts with no preamble, just a glance at the sky. There once was a man, he says, who walked so far north the stars froze in his beard. A few heads nod. No one questions the opening. It's not meant to be questioned. He walked until his voice stopped working, until the only sound he could make was breath. He thought he had come to the end of the world, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of the sky. A log pops in the fire, sending up a flurry of sparks like startled insects. He built a tent there out of silence, hunted with no weapons, ate no meat, and at night he would stare at the sky until it blinked back. You glance upward, the lights are out again, taking a break maybe. Even sky spirits need naps. One night, the storyteller continues, the sky opened its mouth. Not wide, not loud, just enough for a whisper. The children lean in, you do too, though you try to look casual about it, and that whisper. It didn't sound like anything at first, it was just wind. Then it became a voice, and then it became a name. He pauses dramatically, taking a slow sip from a wooden cup. The fire waits politely for him to continue. The man never told anyone what that name was, but he returned to the people changed. His eyes glowed green. He never spoke again, but when he slept he smiled, every night, until he died. The fire flares briefly. A child sneezes. Someone hands them a fur to wrap tighter. You glance around and realize no one is smiling. They're not sad either. Just quiet in that respectful way reserved for stories with teeth. Historians, of course, still argue whether these tales of silent sky travelers were metaphorical expressions of solitude, metaphysical hallucinations brought on by hunger, or perhaps mnemonic devices to pass down ancient celestial calendars. But sitting here beneath the hush of cold stars and the occasional yawn of a tired dog, you find it hard to care what they argue about. Because there's something alive in this fire, and, in the story, another drumbeat. This time a woman begins a song. Her voice is soft but firm, and the words ride a melody that flows like snowmelt over stone. You don't understand all the words, but you catch a few. Sky breath, returned child. There are harmonies, now others, joining in, adding low tones like earth humming underfoot. The boy closes his eyes and rocks back and forth. The song doesn't build. It just sustains, like the lights themselves. Then the rhythm slows, the voices dim, and once again the old man speaks. She was his daughter, he says. Everyone knows who he means. She could hear things others couldn't. Trees calling, water sleeping, and sometimes the lights. He gestures to the sky, where the first streak of green begins to unfurl again, just above the lake's far edge. Slowly, it sways, stretching from left to right, like a spirit adjusting its coat. She went up into the hills one winter, alone, sat in the snow for 3 nights, didn't eat, didn't blink. On the 4th night, the lights came so low they touched her cheek. You don't even try to blink now. The story has you by the collar. When she came back, she spoke in riddles for a season, wouldn't eat food unless it was frozen, claimed the sky had fed her secrets too heavy for warmth. He leans in slightly and the firelight carves deep canyons into his face. Some say the lights marked her, others say they took something in exchange. Either way, she was never quite here after that, nor quite gone. He shrugs as if to say, that's how it is. The story ends not with applause, but with silence. A thoughtful, sleepy silence that tastes like pine smoke and old knowledge. A girl beside you quietly passes around a bowl of dried berries and fish. No one speaks, but everyone eats. Even in story time, mouths get dry and bellies growl. You lean back, your spine pressing into a bundle of rolled pelts. The sky above swirls again, brighter this time. Green sheets of colour ripple across the stars like someone pulling strings behind the scenes. Somewhere beyond this flickering light, beyond the reach of fire and story, something watches back. And maybe, just maybe, it smiles too. In the soft dim of pre-dawn, not quite night, not quite morning, you're awakened by a gentle tug at your shoulder. It's Nulok again. He doesn't speak. Just nods toward the tent flap, where the sky leaks a faint purple light like bruised ice. Outside, the camp is still asleep. Only the smoke remembers to move coiling slowly above the sleeping tents. Your breath curls around your lips as you follow Nulok to the edge of the village, where the lake gives way to sparse woods and rising hills beyond. Today he carries no weapons, only a satchel of tools and a curved blade, obsidian by the look of it. Black, glossy, sharp enough to carve through sinew and time alike. You carry what he hands you, a bundle wrapped in bark cloth and tied with twine. It smells faintly of cedar and grease. We're going to see the bones, he murmurs. Cool, just bones, that's fine. Nothing says relaxing morning walk like unprompted ossuary visits. You hike in silence. The snow is deeper here, reaching your shins in some places. The trees grow crooked like they started upright but got distracted by something. Ravens circle above now and then, but they don't call out. They're watching again, as always. After nearly an hour, the trees thin into a clearing with a strange hush. It's not quiet, it's hushed, like even the snowflakes hold their breath. At the center stands a low structure half buried in earth and moss. It's not a building exactly, more like a pile of logs, bones and stones arranged with unsettling precision. Some of the bones are clearly animal caribou wolf, but others are too long, too straight. You don't ask. Nulok kneels and begins to unwrap the bundle he carried. Inside more bones, clean yellowed. Some carved with symbols, zigzags, moons, what looks like a fish giving birth to a star. One is drilled through, turning it into a kind of whistle. He holds it up to the air and blows. The sound is not pleasant. It's thin, high, barely a tone at all, more like air remembering music than actual music, the kind of note you feel in your teeth, not your ears. You feel ridiculous for shivering, but you shiver anyway. He begins placing the bones into the structure, fitting them carefully into spaces where they clearly once belonged. It's like rebuilding a puzzle that's never finished. You help because you're invited to, and because this kind of help doesn't feel optional. Somewhere in the arrangement lies a bowl of dried berries, shriveled, frostbitten. Next to it, a tuft of hair braided with sinew. An offering, maybe, or a promise. You look up. The sky is pale now, the aurora gone, but something still lingers, a pressure, a presence, like you're being weighed or counted. This is where the ones before were buried, Nulok says quietly, adjusting a femur into place. You mean your ancestors? He shakes his head. Older? You pause. How much older? He doesn't answer, which is deeply on brand for him. Archaeologists today, of course, argue endlessly about the earliest inhabitants of the Yukon. Some claim the land was settled nearly 12,000 years ago. Others suggest older sites haven't been found yet or were swallowed by time and ice. There's a lingering theory, mostly ignored, that certain burial sites predate even known migration waves. The kind of theory that gets mentioned once at a conference, then promptly laughed into academic exile. But here in this clearing, someone knew how to build a grave out of both reverence and design. Each object you help place feels chosen, not just for symbolism, but for memory. These aren't just offerings, they're reminders. As you work, Nulok hums softly a droning chant that never quite resolves. The same note over and over like a lullaby, meant for something sleeping under the snow. After a while, he stands and brushes his hands clean. We leave now. You don't question him. You've learned better. The walk back is slower, not physically but spiritually. You keep turning back, half expecting the grave to vanish, but it doesn't. It stays where it is, half swallowed by earth and frost and time. At one point, you pass a tree with bark cut away in a spiraled shape. Someone has burned a symbol into it. You recognize it from one of the bones. What does that mean, you ask? Nulok glances at it, then shrugs. Direction or a joke. Cool. Spiraled bone jokes from forgotten cultures. Nothing eerie about that. When you return to the village, the camp is awake. Fires crackle, children yell about breakfast, and someone is trying to boil something that smells aggressively of fish. The old woman sees you and nods once knowingly. She doesn't ask where you went. She doesn't need to. You sit by the fire a bit farther from the others than usual. The warmth feels different. You notice the way your hands now smell faintly of ancient ash and cold marrow. Later, as the day fades and the sky begins its dance again, you think about those bones, clean, silent, organized, and you wonder what the lights whispered to them. before they became bones. That evening, the fire feels warmer than usual, or maybe your skin remembers the grave's chill and overcompensates. You sit near the hearth, chewing on something vaguely fish-shaped, while your eyes drift upward to the sky, which is already beginning to swirl with light. Pale green tonight, like a soft moss spread across the stars. Children dart between tents playing a game involving sticks and snowballs and the casual suspension of rules. Every so often a child will stop, look up at the aurora and go still as if the sky suddenly reminded them they are very, very small. Then they'll shrug and return to shrieking. The old woman by the fire again. This time she's stitching something, a strip of hide with tiny beads sewn in a pattern that looks random, until you realize it matches the constellation above you. Sort of, if you squint. She glances at you. You saw the bones. You nod. There's no point pretending otherwise. She pulls the thread tight. Good. They like being remembered. You're about to ask if they ever visit the camp when she shifts slightly and begins to speak, not to you, not exactly, but out into the cold air between you. There was a time, she begins, when the lights told us what to hunt. The others fall quiet. One of the children scoots closer, sensing a story coalescing like frost on bark. They'd flicker green for caribou, red for fish. And if they flashed blue, well, then you stayed home. Why, a girl whispers. The woman smiles faintly, because blue meant the land was listening, and you never hunt while being listened to. You file that one away for later. There's a kind of calm to these stories, not the excited wonder of a fantasy, but the soft pull of a half-memory, like something your ancestors once knew but forgot while inventing indoor plumbing. She continues stitching. One winter, the lights came down so low they burned holes in the snow. Not big ones, just small, scorched spots. And when the hunters followed the burn marks, they found signs. What kind of signs, a boy asks, chewing the end of his mitten. She looks at him directly, eyes sharp. Antlers made of stone. Fish carved from ice. A bird that sang only in the direction of the wind. The boy swallows. The elders knew this wasn't for us. It was a warning, a test. They left gifts, bones, beads, songs. Then they walked away. And you ask because you can't help yourself. She knots the thread, cuts it, and shrugs. And that winter, no one starved. You nod, noted, when in doubt, leave a bead for the sky. One of the younger men speaks up. My grandfather said the lights were the eyes of the ones who went before. Watching, not judging, just curious. Another voice joins in. My uncle said they were just cold spirits trying to remember how to dance. And someone else. My cousin swore they were sky foxes chasing birds made of snow. You smile. It's comforting in a weird way to know no one agrees, that even here where the aurora is as familiar as hunger, no one has the correct answer. Just stories folded into stories. Historians, as always, circle this campfire from afar, scribbling notes about animism, cultural symbolism, and maybe even synesthesia. Some think early humans saw the lights as literal animal spirits. Others argue the lights were just seasonal backdrops for deeper myths. But none of them have tasted this fish or sat this close to a fire sown with story embers. Tonight someone brings out a hide scroll, old, cracked, painted in loops of red and black. You're told it's a sky map, but it doesn't resemble any star chart you've seen. The shapes are more like trails, rivers, spirals. You trace one with your finger. That's the ghost path, someone says behind you. You pause. Ghosts use it to find their way home. The voice continues, but only if we remember the curves right. How do you know we remembered right? The person shrugs. They haven't complained. Comforting logic. The scroll is folded again and returned to its pouch. The fire pops. Someone begins to hum a new song unfamiliar with a strange rhythm. It sounds like snow falling in a dream. You lean back and let the sound carry you. The aurora thickens above green, deepening into blue, laced with purple veins that crackle faintly across the stars. You think of the burned snow patches of antlers made of stone, of a bird that sings wind. You wonder what else is out there listening. Eventually the fire dies down and people drift to their tents. You stay seated, chin tucked into your collar, watching the last of the embers glow like tiny eyes, and just before you rise, something flickers at the edge of your vision, just outside the ring of tents. A shadow, a movement, a maybe. It's gone before you can turn fully. Probably a trick of the light. Probably. You head to your sleeping furs, but the image lingers. Antlers, wind songs, burn marks in snow, and always the lights. The next morning greets you not with sunlight, but with the slow exhale of clouds thick as wool. The world outside is grey, wrapped in a quilt of soft silence. Snow falls again, not the wild blizzard kind, but the sleepy whispering flakes that drift sideways and seem to decide mid-air where they'd like to land. You pull your cloak tighter and step out into the stillness. Newlock waits at the edge of camp holding something in both hands, a bundle wrapped in hide, tied with sinew and dusted with frost. He says nothing. He's really perfecting that whole cryptic guide aesthetic. You follow him again, no questions this time. You've learned the path answers for itself if you let it. Today's journey is different. You're not heading toward bones or prey or the kind of story that demands a fire. This time you're going to see tools, not glamorous, you think, but here. A knife tells better stories than a mouth, and a fishhook holds more secrets than a priest. The snow deepens as you walk, soft, weightless, until it begins to resist. Your knees ache. Newlock doesn't slow. Eventually you reach a sloping ridge where stone juts from the earth like teeth. Beneath a large outcrop partially sheltered by a wind-gnarled pine is a pit lined with slabs roofed in bark and packed snow. A storage place. Inside, Newlock unwraps the bundle. Obsidian blades glint in the low light, curved, flaked, dangerously beautiful. Beside them, bone needles smoothed by years of use nestled like sleeping birds. A fire striker made from iron pyrite and a handful of awls, some tipped with sinew thread already coiled. There's also a tiny pouch that, when opened, reveals a dark paste. What's that, you ask, leaning closer? Newlock raises an eyebrow. Moose grease mixed with spruce gum. Sunscreen. You blink. Seriously? He nods. Snow burns skin, worse than fire. You make a mental note to add ancient sunscreen to your collection of unexpected wisdoms. Historians often gloss over these details, the clever, everyday brilliance of people who couldn't afford mistakes. You realize now that every tool here is the result of centuries of trial error and really unfortunate blisters. He hands you a knife. You take it carefully. The obsidian edge glows faintly, not with light, but with possibility. It's lighter than it looks. Cold, but warming quickly in your palm. That blade, he says, was shaped by a woman named Unali. She died 3 winters ago. Used to say the stone talked back when it didn't like how you held it. You turn it over slowly. It does sort of hum. Or maybe that's your stomach. She also made this, he adds, holding up a pair of snow goggles. Yes, snow goggles fashioned from bone, with thin slits cut across the center. For walking on the ice fields. Too much glare, you go blind. You try them on. Everything goes dark, except for two thin white lines of snowlight. You remove them quickly, bumping into the tool pouch. One item rolls free, a small disc of carved antler with spiral etchings. It has no obvious function. What's this for, you ask? Nulok pauses. No one remembers. You both stare at it for a while. Then he gently sets it back. Sometimes forgetting is part of the story. He begins packing the tools again, replacing each one with care, like putting bones back in the right place. This is their resting ground, not a museum, not a hoarder's cave. Just a quiet spot where past and present sip tea and exchange small talk. As you begin the return walk, he says, "There's a place we passed yesterday. You didn't notice, because I was looking at the grave." "No, because it hides well." You glance behind, back toward the ridge. What was it? A hollow in the glacier. Inside markings. Your breath catches paintings. He nods. Carvings, older than our words. Not even my grandmother knew what they meant. You press. What do they look like? He shrugs. Spirals. Eyes. Shapes that don't stay still. You look at him. How can a shape not stay still? He glances toward the sky. You'll see. Classic Nulok. When you return to the village, your boots soaked and your hands tingling, the old woman is stirring something thick in a pot. She nods when she sees you, then points to the knife in your belt. She spoke to that stone for 6 days before it let her shape it. You mean Unali. She listened better than most, the old woman says. Stone prefers listeners. You sit by the fire, the blade warm now at your side. The sky begins its slow transformation above streaks of pale green, once more brushing the clouds away. You realize then every object in this village is part of the story. Not background, not props, characters. The bone needles, the carved spoons, the ice fishing rods balanced like antennae for ancestral broadcasts. Historians still argue whether indigenous toolkits were primarily utilitarian or imbued with spiritual significance. Here, the answer is simple. Yes. Both. Later that night, you lie under your furs, the knife wrapped beside you like a sleeping sibling. You close your eyes and dream of spirals that move, of stone that whispers, and of a woman who spent 6 days learning to listen, to silence. And above it all, the lights keep dancing, painting the tools, the trees, even your dreams with green breath and ancient knowing. You wake to a wind that sings, not a howling gale, not a blizzard's growl, just a soft tonal sweep, as though someone is brushing the tops of the trees with a giant reed flute. The tent shifts gently around you, creaking like a cradle. You lie still for a moment, listening until you realize you're not alone. The old woman is sitting near the fire again, turning something over in her hands. A tooth, perhaps, or a small stone. She doesn't look up. "Do you know what lived here before the trees?" she asks. You shake your head, even though she can't see it. "Giants," she says with no hesitation. "Big, hairy, slow. Their teeth were bigger than your hands, and their hearts beat loud enough to wake birds in spring. You blink off your sleep. Mammoths!" She smiles faintly. That's what the scientists call them. But we have better names. One clan called them ground drummers. Another said they were the snow singers. She tosses the object, a polished molar it turns out, into your lap. It's yellowed and ridged, the kind of thing you'd see in a museum case labeled Pleistocene fauna, Northwest Territories. But here it's just Tuesday. You ever hear the ground hum, she asks. Not the wind, not the ice, the ground. You nod, you think you have. Or maybe your brain's still thawing from sleep. Some say the giants never left, just sank into the hills under the rivers. When the lights dance too long, it wakes something in them. Outside you hear dogs barking, then a laugh, then silence again. Later that morning, you find yourself walking with a younger boy, no more than 12 maybe, who insists on showing you the Giant's Tooth Hill. You assume it's a joke. It is not a joke. You climb a rocky ridge where the snow thins and the air smells sharply of iron. At the top, partially buried in permafrost, is an enormous curved white shape. You squint. It's a tusk, long, weathered, almost fossilized. One end is split where freeze and thaw cracked it over time. The boy taps it gently with a stick. See, he says. Still sings if you listen. You put your ear close. At first, just wind. Then something else, a low distant vibration, could be imagination, could be air shifting through hollow bone, could be the ground remembering. Historians do know mammoths once walked these territories. Their bones have been pulled from the Yukon ice for decades, skulls, ribs, teeth the size of soup bowls. Some say the last of them lingered longer in the north, hiding among the hills while the world forgot them. A few fringe scholars have even argued that some mammoth remains show signs of ceremonial arrangement, not just killed, but placed. That's not in the textbooks, of course, but standing here staring at a tusk half as long as your body, you begin to wonder. The boy pulls out a piece of red ochre wrapped in hide. He draws a spiral on the tusk. Why that shape, you ask? Because it's what the lights do, he says. You nod like you understand. Back at the village, people are cleaning hides and carving bone needles. One of the men is hollowing out a length of driftwood for a snowshoe frame. Someone else is sharpening fish hooks with obsidian flakes. You sit beside a woman with a length of sinew in her teeth. She's threading it through a sealskin parka, reinforcing the shoulders. That spiral you mention, the boy drew it on a mammoth tusk. She doesn't stop sewing. Good. They like to be remembered. The mammoths, the stories, she replies. That afternoon you follow a hunting party to a ridge where a glacier once flowed. Now it's mostly buried under earth and spruce, but in places the ice still peeks out blue, ancient groaning softly under its own weight. You kneel by an exposed patch and press your palm to it. It's smooth, cold, patient. Near the edge, something protrudes. You brush away snow and see a jawbone. Not human, not recent, still mostly intact. Wide molars, flat and worn. Another mammoth, maybe. Another ghost. Nulok kneels beside you and says nothing. He places a strip of cedar beside the bone, lights it with a flint spark. The smoke rises in a straight line, then curls toward the sky. You don't speak. The wind does it for you. That night, around the fire, the children ask questions. Did the giant speak? What did they eat? Could they see the lights too? The old woman chuckles and waves them quiet. They didn't speak like us. They remembered. Every step they took said something. Every breath moved trees, and yes, they saw the lights. That's where they got their names. She picks up a stick and draws in the snow beside the fire, a rough oval for the body, 4 lines, for legs, a spiral, above the head. They whispered their names into the lights, she says, so the sky wouldn't forget them. And in that moment you realize the lights are not just seen, they are listened to, and perhaps long ago the mammoths The giants did more than walk the land. They spoke, and the sky still remembers. You're walking again, this time not with Lulled, not even with a guide. Just you, your cloak, the fishbone amulet around your neck, and a faint trail through wind-packed snow. The old woman told you where to go, a ridge that curves east, past the hollowed birch grove, and down into a frozen riverbed. She said, follow the places where silence thickens, helpful, vague, cryptic, standard. Still you go, because something in her voice told you the story was waiting, not buried like bones, but alive and walking just a few paces ahead. The snow here is strange thinner, dusted with powder that lifts easily in the wind, and beneath it you begin to see faint lines, trails, not made by boots or paws or hooves. These are worn into the earth, indentations that stretch and curve across the ice like veins. You follow them, and then you see it. Not a road, not a path, a trade route, or what's left of one. Historians say the northern peoples had complex networks of trade far earlier than most assume. Along the Yukon River and its many frozen tributaries, items moved hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers. Obsidian from Alaska, pottery from far south, copper, beads, shells from oceans you've never even seen. Here, in this shallow riverbed, the past whispers in bootprints long faded. You kneel and brush snow from a patch of packed earth, revealing something small and unmistakably human-made, a shard of fired clay, red and black. Smooth on one side, ridged on the other. Pottery, northern Yukon, 800 AD. From where could be from 1,000 miles south. Could have come with someone who walked the spiral trails all the way from what's now the Columbia Plateau. You pocket it gently, then you see the next clue, a circle of stones half sunk in ice, a fire pit long abandoned. Someone rested here, not recently, not during your lifetime, and maybe not even within memory, but they cooked something here once. You try to imagine what it was, maybe dried fish, maybe traded roots, maybe something more exotic, something carried in a pouch from far away and boiled in a pot made from clay that spoke another language entirely. A raven lands nearby, hops once, tilts its head. Then it lifts off again without a sound. You continue walking. Soon you reach a low outcrop of black stone where marks are scratched into the rock, faint, shallow, but intentional. You can barely trace them. Circles within circles, a jagged line like a river or lightning bolt, and 3 vertical lines evenly spaced. Trademarks, the old woman had said, signs for those passing through, markings for direction or warnings or jokes. You're starting to suspect most of her explanations include joke as an option, just in case. Still, the markings feel important, like someone said I was here and someone else replied I passed through. And maybe neither had names anymore, but the land remembers the exchange as you stand and turn to continue. Something glints in the snow. You bend down and uncover a thin strip of beaten copper, bent in the middle, pierced at one end. A pendant maybe, or part of a cloak pin. You've seen nothing like it in the village. You hold it in your hand and feel the metal chill your skin. It's old, but not broken, just waiting. Trade came both ways, Lulled once said. Stories moved faster than things. A bowl may take weeks, but a joke, a warning, a ghost that travels overnight. You sit on the outcrop for a while, staring out over the flat white land, imagining people walking here, young, old, wrapped in furs, their voices carried by wind. Maybe they were quiet, like Lulled. Maybe they sang. Maybe they argued about whether to turn left at the spiral tree. There are no ruins, no paved roads, just traces. Historians still debate how structured these routes were. Some argue they were seasonal, shifting with the herds and the rivers. Others suggest fixed trails maintained over generations, complete with stopping points, signal markers, and unwritten agreements. A few believe shamans mapped them in visions guided not by terrain, but by rhythm, aurora pulses, dreams, or patterns in bird flight. That last part gets footnoted, then quietly ignored. You begin the walk back, cradling the copper strip in your glove. The snow deepens slightly as evening thickens. The trees don't reappear for some time, just scrubby brush and hunched willow branches clawing out of the frozen earth. When you return to camp, the light has returned to the sky. Green, violet, rippling wide like it's stretching after a long nap. The villagers are preparing something, a small fire circle away from the main hearth, a ring of stones, a fur-lined seat in the center. You raise an eyebrow. The old woman sees you and nods. Tonight, she says, you watch the lights properly. You don't argue. You hand her the pottery shard and the copper strip. She runs her thumb over both slowly. Good, she says, tucking them away. They still remember their way home. Later that night, you sit in the center of the circle, alone. The sky dances, the lights shift, and somewhere in the rhythm of their movement you begin to understand. These weren't just trade routes, they were lifelines, to the past, to each other, to the sky. It's early night again, the kind of night that doesn't feel like the end of anything, just the long middle of a conversation the sky's been having with itself for centuries. You sit in the circle, they prepared, legs crossed, wrapped in furs, a faintly fishy-smelling cushion beneath you. No one joins, that's the point. The fire crackles low beside you, not for heat, but for rhythm, for a little flickering company. The aurora rolls in overhead like a tide that forgot it wasn't made of water. Greens swirl into purples laced with silver threads. At one point it looks like a hand reaching down, then it changes. You blink, it's already something else. Behind you, someone clears their throat. You don't turn. You've learned by now that not all visitors expect or want eye contact. A tall figure steps into view, cloaked, masked. The mask is long-faced, carved from wood, bleached white by cold. Slitted eyes, a triangular nose, no mouth. Feathers crown the top, raven feathers, judging by the gleam, and strands of carved bone hang from either side like earrings made by the wind itself. No words, just a presence. Then two more masked figures enter the ring. One wears a painted fish skin over their shoulders, the mask's mouth wide and grinning. The other wears a hood sewn from bird wings, mask etched with whorls that shimmer in the aurora's light. They take their places around the fire without speaking. They don't move like performers, they move like memories. This is a ceremony, but not the grand kind, not for weddings or harvests or the solstice. This is something quieter, personal, intimate. You realize it might even be for you. They begin with sound, not music, not quite. More like breath patterns. Each exhales at a different rhythm. One slow and even, another sharp and soft, the third in long-drawn pulses like wind through pine. Then with uncanny timing they begin to move. Their movements are slow, deliberate, almost lazy. A shoulder rolls, a hand lifts, a foot pivots. But none of it feels rehearsed, more like they're following a beat outside your range of hearing, or obeying instructions stitched into the snow. One figure lifts their arms to the sky. Another circles you. The third kneels and presses their palm to the earth, then to your shoulder. The sky above answers. The aurora pulses, suddenly one wide ripple sweeping from east to west, like a sigh stretched across the stars. You feel it in your chest. And then the masks begin to hum. Low, wavering tones, not words, just presence. Sound given shape. You think you hear your name, not the one from your birth certificate, or that time you tried to start a poetry blog. A different name, a quieter one, the name that lives behind your ribs. The masked figure with the feather crown leans closer. They don't speak, but their hand raises, and from their palm falls a tiny carved mask small enough to fit between two fingers shaped just like theirs. They press it into your palm, then they step back. One by one, the masked figures retreat into the night, disappearing into the flickering dark, swallowed not by shadow but by knowing. You sit alone again. The fire is nearly out, but the lights above have grown brighter. They twist, fold, reform, and for a moment you swear they wear masks too. In the days that follow, the villagers tell you little. You ask the old woman, "What was that?" She shrugs. "A welcome? From who? From whoever remembers." Helpful. You speak to Lulled. He just nods. They gave you a mask. That's something. You hold it up. It's warm from your pocket, its tiny slits catching even the faintest gleam of light. Was it a dream? He shrugs. Does it matter? Fair enough. One of the women, a hunter, with a half-missing finger and a wicked sense of humor, leans in as you help scrape a hide. "I wore a mask," one she says. "Didn't get one back. I think they liked you." You can't tell if she's jealous or amused. Maybe both. That night, you place the mask by your sleeping furs, just to see if it dreams. The sky keeps dancing. Historians still argue whether masked rituals in the north were purely symbolic or whether they served as conduits for shamanic states, pathways into altered consciousness, spirit communication, or mnemonic pantomime. But none of that matters here. Here, masks are not just disguises, they are invitations to remember, to be remembered, to listen. You don't know what story they told you that night, but you know you were in it. The next morning your breath fogs the tent flap before your hand even touches it. You step outside and the air greets you like a polite slap. Everything is frost, the ground, the trees, your eyelashes. Even the dogs seem slower, their tails wagging, in a tempo usually reserved for funeral drumming. But there's no time for lingering, not today. Today, you've been invited, though invited might be generous, to a ritual that happens only when the aurora appears before sunset. It happened yesterday, barely. And now the village must answer. They call it the Sky Watcher's trial. You asked if it was a trial like a test or a trial like a courtroom. The old woman just grinned and said yes, helpful as ever. You follow Lulled out beyond the camp's fire circle, along a trail half covered in wind-blown snow. The path climbs winding through crooked spruce and leaning larch, until it breaks open onto a broad ridge with sweeping views in every direction. There's a stone circle here, large, wide, made from boulders with flat tops and no carvings, at least none that time hasn't erased. The snow has gathered in the middle like an offering nobody dared clean up. 3 others wait there already, all masked. You're handed one too. It's not the small one they gave you by the fire. This one is larger, more serious, made of bark and soot, decorated with feather tips and bone dust. You place it on your face and everything dims except the sky. Perfect. The old woman steps into the circle and motions for you to kneel. you'll watch the lights until they speak, she says, as if it's no harder than watching soup until it boils. And if they don't, you ask. She shrugs that maybe they've already spoken. Vague, threatening, poetic. The trifecta, you sit. The wind whistles low. The other watchers are statues in the snow. You can't tell who's who beneath their masks, and that's probably the point. The sun dips lower, washing the snow in pale amber. Then, a flicker. It starts faintly, as if the sky's warming up its limbs. Green pulses ripple behind thin clouds, threading between stars. The colour thickens, twisting upward, then across. The shape is strange tonight, more like waves than curtains. One of the masked watchers gasps. You all stay kneeling. Then comes the real moment. Not a voice, not a shape, but a knowing. Something shifts behind your ribs, like a lock clicking open on a door you didn't know you had. You close your eyes and the colours burn through your eyelids. It's not just light. It's motion turned sacred. The wind dies completely. The ridge is silent, the trees hold their breath. And then a hum begins, not from anyone you can see, from somewhere else. It vibrates through your chest. A low note, barely sound, more like gravity reconsidering its options. Historians have recorded dozens of oral traditions about auroral sounds, crackles, hums, faint whistling. Science mostly dismisses them as auditory illusions or atmospheric static. But out here, under this sky, kneeling in a stone circle with a mask filtering your breath and your doubts, it's hard to dismiss anything. The aurora coils above, now flashing with streaks of blue and purple. It bends in a circle, then suddenly breaks, split down the middle like someone tore the sky open. And from that rupture, a darker patch appears, not black, just less lit, like an eye between thoughts. You exhale slowly. Someone falls sideways in the snow with a soft waft. Not you, not Nulok. One of the masked others. They're breathing but still, face turned upward. Trial passed, trial failed. No one says. The lights swirl again more gently now, as if aware they've revealed too much. The old woman steps forward and taps her staff on the ground once. Everyone rises. You remove your mask. Your face is cold. Your eyes are warm. You saw, she says to you. You nod. What did they say? You think? The answer slips behind your tongue like snow, melting too fast. They said, something old is listening. She squints at you, then gives a single nod. Good enough. Later, back at the camp, you ask Nulok what it means, this trial, this watching, this wordless communion. He says it's not a test you pass, it's one you survive. And the person who fell, he shrugs. She'll sleep a while. Happens? How long? He gives a small smile. How long's a sky whisper? The girl wakes 2 days later, blinking slowly, then immediately asking for smoked fish. All is well. You sit beside her that night. She doesn't talk much, but her gaze lingers on the aurora like she's waiting for something. Eventually, she says, I saw my grandmother in the lights. She was wearing different shoes. You nod solemnly. That happens, you say. Because honestly, it probably does. The stars blink, the sky breathes, and tonight the villagers decide it's time to feed the darkness. It's not as sinister as it sounds, though. You do notice someone muttering to a pouch of dried mushrooms before tossing it into the stew pot. It's simply a feast, but not just any feast. This is the kind you don't plan exactly, the kind that emerges when the weather feels right, when the game's been good, and when the lights above start twisting in ways that make the dogs uneasy. The kind that's part celebration, part distraction, part insurance. You help carry logs to the central fire pit. Someone else rolls out a hide to sit on fringed worn soft by 100 winters. Bowls are carved from horn and filled with root mash, boiled fish, and a slab of something chewy you hope is caribou. The seal fat is already melting in a flat stone pan. It sizzles and pops with the quiet fury of something that's seen too much. As people gather, they don't raise their voices, they don't toast or declare the start. They simply begin to eat. Slowly, intentionally, like every bite is a gift to be unwrapped and rewrapped in memory. A woman beside you, her face dusted with ash from the fire, or perhaps just naturally tattooed with time, offers you a flat cake made from ground pine nuts and wild berries. It's dense, slightly bitter, and absurdly filling. She smiles and says, "Eat slow. This cake holds dreams." You nod mid-chew, hoping she means metaphorically. Someone begins to hum. A deep, throaty sound that seems to rise not from the throat, but from the stomach. Another voice joins. Then a third. Before long, the hum becomes a rhythm, a sound like the spinning of the earth if the earth were trying to lull itself to sleep. Across the fire, a man begins dancing. Not the kind of dance you recognize, no steps, no showmanship, just motion. Arms rise and fall, feet shuffle and turn. It's less about movement and more about mood. He dances like he's translating something only he can hear. Children watch in silence. One begins to mimic him. Small arms, wide grin, pure chaos. Laughter breaks out soft and contagious. Someone passes around a ladle of warm spruce-tip tea, steeped with honey. It smells like melted forest. You sip. It tastes like what snow might remember if it could feel summer. A girl leans over to you and whispers, "The lights are closer tonight." Listen. You do. Not to her voice, but to the sky. And she's right. There's a soft crackle, barely audible like frost breaking underfoot far away. The aurora tonight is unusually bold. Green, yes, but layered with streaks of violet and what might even be gold. It shimmers and you swear you see it, echo the shapes of the dancers, mimicking, exaggerating, joining in. Some say the lights copy us, the old woman says from behind you. Others say we're copying them. Historians still argue whether ceremonies timed to auroral displays held spiritual or social importance you mutter aloud without even thinking. She hears you, snorts. They argue because they weren't invited to the feast. Fair. There are stories too, of course. Always. One man tells of a wolf who sang so beautifully the stars came closer just to listen. Another says he once followed a ribbon of green across the tundra for 3 days and found a cave filled with bones that sang when the wind passed through. No one questions the stories. That's not the point. One of the elders pulls out a carved seal jaw, polished worn, strung with sinew loops. It's a drum, but smaller, softer. He taps it with his fingers as others begin to chant. You've never heard the words? They're old. Maybe older than the village itself, maybe borrowed from people long gone or past in dreams. The rhythm is slow with gaps between phrases like, the chant keeps forgetting what it was saying and deciding that's fine. Then comes the part you were warned about. The quiet. Everything stops, no one speaks, no one chews. Even the dogs go still. You wait, 1 breath, 2, 3, then the lights respond. They spiral downward, twisting like a thread pulled through invisible cloth. And for 1 long, absurd second you feel like they're all leaning in. Watching, not judging, not threatening, just present. You feel a tingle along your scalp, a pressure in your ribs, a shiver that has nothing to do with cold. and you hear no feel something, not language, not music, more like permission. Then someone lets out a long sigh, the spell breaks, people laugh, the children resume their chaos, someone throws a chunk of dried fish at someone else. The dogs bark with relief, the old woman chuckles beside you. See the lights like a good audience. You realize the feast wasn't for you. It wasn't even for the village. It was for them, for the sky, for the lights, for the ones who watch back. That night you dream of dancing flames and feathered ribbons twirling in clouds, of seal fat sizzling in silence, of songs sung to snow and laughter that leaves no footprints. And somewhere above it all the aurora glows steadily, not just beautiful, hungry. By now the sky feels like an old friend with unpredictable sleep habits, sometimes glowing before dinner, sometimes not until midnight, and occasionally forgetting to show up at all. But tonight it arrives early and eager. You've barely shaken the pine needles from your cloak when someone grabs your sleeve, one of the children face, flushed, from running eyes wild with delight. They found something, she gasps. Under the glacier, you blink. Something like, what kind of something? She grins. Old, weird. You'll see. And of course you follow, because what else would you do? They lead you past the camp along a narrow trail, worn down by countless boots and beasts. The snow crunches beneath your steps, sounding like brittle paper. Eventually you reach the glacier's edge, a vast wall of ancient ice hunched low into the valley, like it collapsed there centuries ago and never got up again. There, a group gathers around a hollow part cave, part crawl space, carved into the base of the ice wall. Inside, flickering torchlight reveals something unmistakable: carvings. The walls shimmer where the torchlight hits the frozen surface. And beneath that shimmer, just under a layer of translucent ice, are etchings, lines, spirals, hands, eyes, and one shape that no one can name. Nulok stands nearby, quiet even by his own impressive standards. You crouch beside him. What is it? He points to the strange shape, neither animal nor human, not quite geometric, not quite organic. It seems to shift depending on where you look. At one angle, it's a circle split by arrows. At another, it's a pair of legs walking backward. And if you tilt your head just enough, it looks like a mouth. It wasn't here before, he murmurs. You blink. What do you mean this cave was empty last spring? Just ice, just meltwater. You both go silent. Someone touches the ice. The shape pulses faintly in the torchlight. A ripple, a trick of vision. You don't ask. The old woman appears, leaning heavily on her staff. She stares at the shape, squints, then mutters. Still whispering, are you? You open your mouth to ask who you is supposed to refer to, but she waves a hand to silence the thought before it can form. They carved messages before writing was born, she says. Deep ones, under stone, under ice, where only memory can find them. You nod slowly. Historians still debate whether glacial carvings in the Yukon are authentic or the result of natural processes misinterpreted as symbolic. You say it out loud, partly to ground yourself. The old woman snorts. Of course they debate. They've never tried talking to a glacier. She steps into the hollow, leans close to the wall, and places her palm flat against it. I remember this, she murmurs. When I was a child, they showed me in a dream, but I didn't believe it then. You look around. The younger villagers are whispering. No one dares joke, not now. The etchings deepen as the torchlight warms the ice just slightly. It's like watching ink rise from paper. Only this paper is 1,000 years old and made of frozen breath. One girl, barely taller than the torch, says softly, "Maybe it was carved by the lights." Everyone pauses. That's the thing about these stories. They're not rejected, they're absorbed. Someone hums a low note and the sound fills the hollow space. It echoes strangely. It comes back to you, changed. You step forward. The shape, the mouth or the arrow or whatever it is, seems to shift again. Now it looks like a spiral with footsteps around it. You exhale slowly, feeling your own breath fog up the surface. And for just a moment you swear the fog inside the ice moves. Not melts, moves. Then it's gone. Back at camp, no one speaks about it much. The story is already being folded into the day's rhythm. Someone claims the mouth symbol matches a dream they had last month. Another swears their grandmother wore a spiral pendant just like it. No one says, "That's impossible." They just nod and add their own piece. You help carve symbols into a fresh birch panel by the firelight that night. It's not an exact copy of the glacier carvings, just an impression. A placeholder. The birch curls slightly under your knife, releasing its faint spicy scent. The bark bends with ease, as if eager to remember. Someone places the panel into a wooden frame near the communal tent entrance. The idea is simple if the ice decides to hide its message again. At least something here will keep whispering. You lie awake that night, replaying the shape in your head. Was it new? Was it always there, waiting for the right eyes? Was it meant for you? You don't know, but you dream in spirals. And when you wake, your fingers are cold. Your breath curls into the air. And you have the faint, unsettling sense that something watched you sleep. You wake later than usual. The tent is warm, the fire just a red eye in the ashes, and the village outside sounds muffled by snow. No voices, no footsteps, just the occasional gust of wind brushing the hides like a slow exhale. You sit up, slowly, stretch until your joints sound like breaking twigs and wrap yourself in the now familiar furs. Outside, the world has changed. The snow came overnight, not a dusting, not a polite sprinkle, but a deep, heavy silence. It covers the tents, the trees, even the fire pits. Everything is softened as though the land has decided to hush itself for a while. But there's movement near the edge of the camp. You see them immediately, masks hung in trees, not many, just 3. They swing gently tied with sinew, turning slowly in the still air. One is long-nosed and feathered. One is flat and painted red with no holes for eyes. And the third is carved with teeth, far too many teeth for something that doesn't need to eat. You step closer. No one else seems to notice. Or rather, no one seems surprised. A child walks past you and gives the masks a casual wave, like greeting an aunt who lives under a log. You glance around. Why are they here? The child shrugs. For the spirits, right? Of course. The old woman appears from behind a tent, trailing smoke from a bundle of burning moss. She walks slowly toward the trees and begins circling the masks, humming low and tuneless. You fall into step beside her. Did someone die, you ask? She chuckles. Not this time. Then, they're visitors, she says. They come when the snow falls just right. You look up. The branches above are still heavy with powder. The sky is an endless ceiling of white. Visitors from where she doesn't answer. Instead, she stops at the red mask and adjusts its knot. Some say they're ancestors, others say they're spirits looking for stories. You tilt your head. Don't they already have stories? She nods. Yes, but they like new ones. You both stand in silence for a while, watching the masks spin. The one with too many teeth grins in your direction. You pretend not to notice. Later, around the fire, Lulled joins you. He's carrying a fresh strip of dried meat and something small, wrapped in bark. He sits beside you and places the bundle between you both. "What's that?" you ask. He opens it slowly. Inside is a mask unfinished, just the blank curve of shaped birch bark, still pale unpainted with small holes for the cords, but no face yet. You're making one. He nods. "For the trees." "No," he says, "for me." You pause. "Do you always make your own?" He gives you a look that might mean, "Of course." Or possibly, "Do I look like the kind of person who buys a spirit mask at a market stall? I've only worn the ones they gave me," you admit. He shrugs. "That's fine. But when you make your own, it listens better." Listens to what he chews his meat thoughtfully. The part of you don't talk too much. You pick up the blank mask and hold it to your face. Through the eye holes, the world looks the same, but it feels different. You lower it again. "I wouldn't know how to begin," you say. He shrugs again. "Start with something you're afraid to forget." That night you sit in your tent, scraping small lines into bark with a sliver of obsidian. You're not carving a face, not yet, just lines, curves, shapes that echo in your head from that glacier cave, from the dream, from the crack in the aurora that opened like an eye. You don't know what it means yet, you're not supposed to. Historians predictably still debate the function of tree-hung masks in northern traditions. Were they warnings, honoring the dead protective talismans, artistic expressions of seasonal shift? The answer, as always, is yes, and also none of those. The masks tonight are not labelled, not explained. They are hung, they are seen, and then eventually they are left alone. A few days later, a storm comes and the wind knocks one from its branch. No one moves to catch it. It falls softly, silently, and lands upright in the snow. Smiling. Snow still blankets everything in thick, white silence. The trees groan softly under their burden, and even the dogs move more carefully, as if they too are mindful not to offend the hush. But the hush doesn't last. A call goes out at dawn, not loud, but unmistakable. 3 short bursts from a curved horn followed by 2 long ones. You hear it in your bones before you hear it with your ears. Someone has found a burial. You're out of the tent before you've properly laced your boots. Others are already gathering, moving toward the far end of the ridge path that overlooks the frozen river. There's no shouting, no sprinting. Everyone walks with intention. Even the children tread lightly, their games paused. You follow the footprints until they veer into a drifted-over depression in the earth, a small hollow, half covered in pine and snow. The shape is barely there, more memory than landmark. But someone must have noticed something. They did. A length of antler juts from the snow, curved and smooth with carvings spiraling down its surface. The elder who found it, a woman with a spine like a mountain and a voice like frozen moss, says she felt the air shift as she passed. Like walking through someone else's breath, she murmurs. You help dig carefully. The snow comes away in layers like flipping through pages of a silent book. Beneath it lies a frame of stones carefully arranged in an oval. At the center, bones, not scattered, placed. A skull rests atop folded arms, long bones beside it, vertebrae still holding their arc, as if the person inside had simply curled up and fallen asleep 1,000 years ago. But it's the objects that surround the bones that still the crowd. Carved beads blackened with age, a flat piece of copper, a small bark scroll too brittle to touch, and nestled in the curve of the ribs a round stone mask no larger than your palm. It has no eyes, just a circle smooth and cold. You kneel beside the grave and feel something you can't name settle in your chest. The old woman leans over your shoulder. "They weren't buried," she says softly. "They were sheltered." You nod. Someone begins a slow chant, low, steady, not melodic, but anchoring. Others join in, not in unison, but in orbit. Sound layered on sound like moss covering stone. You notice a new person among the group, a man with a face like the tree line and boots stitched with what looks like dyed porcupine quills. He says nothing but watches the burial with eyes so still you wonder if he's seen something you haven't. Later you ask Nulok who he is. "He comes when bones are found," he says. Why? Because the bones sometimes remember more than we do. That afternoon the village gathers by the central fire. A decision is made without vote, without speech. They will rebuild the grave, not bury it, restore it. It's not about preservation for study. It's not about hiding or honoring. It's about continuity. So they begin. Stones are rearranged. The mask is replaced precisely where it was found, though someone perhaps instinctively places a carved bead beside it this time. A child brings a handful of snow-melted berries and sets them near the copper piece. You're handed a strand of sinew threaded through a tooth. "What do I do with it?" "Place it somewhere it fits someone," it says. You crouch beside the ribs, hesitate, then tie it gently around one of the longer arm bones. Not to bind it, just to mark it. Like a whisper, like saying we see you. That night, the lights arrive late. But when they do, they blaze. No soft greens tonight. No shy shimmer. Tonight, they burn gold, a rare color. A sky fire streaking from one side of the village to the other, pulsing bright enough to cast shadows. The dogs howl, the trees sway. And somewhere beneath the snow, the bones remember dancing. You lie in your furs that night, eyes open, unable to sleep. The wind rattles the tent, but gently. Not warning, just reminding. And in your mind, the mask returns. Not the one you carry, the one with no eyes. You realize that some things are meant to be seen, not with sight, but with time. And patience, and proximity to fire and bone. Historians still argue whether burial sites this far north were ceremonial or simply practical responses to permafrost and predation. The debate continues in articles, in footnotes, in lectures. But here, a circle of stones, a copper scrap, a mask with no eyes, and a pulse in the sky. You've seen enough to know the dead aren't gone. They're just waiting for the lights to find them. It's colder tonight, not just in the air, but in your spine. A deep kind of cold that hums through your teeth and wraps around your ankles like a forgotten promise. The kind of cold that makes fires feel like negotiation, not comfort. Still you walk. Nulok leads the way again, of course. You've learned by now not to ask questions at the start. He never answers them then. He prefers timing, like the aurora, like stories that wait for the right hush. You climb a ridge above the village. The lake below gleams faintly through the trees, already frozen solid moonlight skating across its surface like a ghost with somewhere better to be. It's quiet. Too quiet, even the snow feels like it's listening. You crest the hill and then you see them. Dog sleds, empty at first glance, but the moment your eyes adjust you realize no, not empty. Each sled is packed with bundles, furs, rope, bone tools, antlers, a bow carved with strange notches you don't recognize, and a drum tied tightly and tucked beneath one sled's lashings like a sleeping heart. Nulok gestures toward the largest of the sleds. "We go up there," he says, pointing toward a wind-carved rise beyond the ridge. You raise an eyebrow. Now he nods. The sky's already awake. You glance up. He's right. The aurora is already stretching across the horizon low tonight, barely above the treetops. A long, thin ribbon of green like the edge of a great curtain slowly being drawn back. It flickers faintly, almost shy. But it's there. And it's waiting. Nulok whistles softly. 4 dogs appear from the shadows harnessed alert. Their breath steams into the cold tails held high, not wagging, not afraid, just focused, ready. He climbs onto the sled and motions for you to take the second. You do. Your sled jolts as the dogs move forward, their paws barely making a sound. The runners hiss softly over the snow, and suddenly you're gliding, not fast, not wild, just steady. You pass trees that lean like listeners, rocks shaped by time and wind into symbols you might have once known. And overhead, the aurora stretches like a horizon flipped upside down. You don't speak, you don't have to. Eventually the trees thin, the wind sharpens, and you arrive. It's not a summit, not a viewpoint, just a flat ridge open to the sky. The wind screams here, but not with anger, with urgency. Nulok stops his sled, you stop beside him, and for a long time you just stand. Then he kneels. You kneel too. Together you unbundle the sleds. He opens the lashings and begins laying the items out in a circle. Not randomly, precisely. You help slowly learning the pattern. A drum to the north, a bow to the west, antlers between them, a strip of bear hide to the east, a carved wooden spoon to the south. At the center, a stone the size of a skull, smoothed flat. Then, the fire. It's built quickly, spruce branches, dry moss, a twist of fat-soaked twine. Nulok sparks it with the flint, and it catches with a hiss. The flames crackle into the freezing air, casting flickering light across the ritual circle. He begins to drum, softly, slowly, not a song, a pulse. You feel it in your knees, in your ribs, in the place behind your heart where old memories sit cross-legged and stubborn. You watch the sky. The aurora thickens. Now it's more than green. Streaks of violet, pulses of amber. It rolls and snaps across the stars like cloth being beaten clean. And then the sound. A low whistling crackle, not imagined, not subtle, like ice shearing from itself, like distant static made holy. Your breath catches. Nulok doesn't stop drumming. He nods toward the fire. Now. You glance down. In your hands is the stone spoon from the circle. You didn't realize you picked it up. You lean forward and tap it once against the flat rock in the center. A deep, echoing clunk. The aurora above pulses. Again, clunk. Another ripple. Again. Clunk. A burst sudden and sharp arcs across the sky like a brushstroke painted by lightning. And then silence. Total. Even the wind stops, even the fire pauses, and in that silence you hear it. A voice, not a word, not a language, just a voice, like a memory that's finally made up its mind. You close your eyes. You feel warmth, not fire, not body heat. Something deeper, older, like being remembered. When you open your eyes, Nulok is still. The fire flickers low. The dogs lie quietly in the snow, ears perked toward the sky. And the aurora gone, not faded, gone. As if it had done what it came to do and vanished before anyone could say thank you. Nulok finally speaks. They listened. You nod. What did they hear you ask? He looks at you. His eyes don't blink. You. The sled ride back is slow, quiet, reverent. No one says a word until the tents are visible again. Nulok pulls ahead slightly, then calls back without turning his head. They don't speak to everyone. You want to ask who they are, but you already know, and they already heard. By morning, the village feels different. Not louder, not busier, just tuned. As if the air itself had been restrung overnight like a drum pulled tight and humming softly under its own skin. The dogs bark a little sharper. The snow creaks underfoot with just a touch more bite. And the people, well, they watch you. Not in a threatening way, not even in a curious one. It's more like recognition, as if you've walked into a room where everyone knows your middle name, but no one's saying it out loud. You pass the old woman as she's rubbing crushed spruce needles into a skin pouch. She glances up, offers you a nod. They heard you, she says. You're still not quite sure what you said. Later that day, Nulok comes by with no warning and no smile, hands you a bundle and simply says, "We go." You don't argue, you're getting good at that. The bundle contains a strip of dried seal meat, a small clay flask of broth that smells like smoked moss and pepper root, and a carved wooden figurine shaped like a bird with outstretched wings and a hollow belly. You hold it up. Why does it feel warm? Nulok glances at it. Because it remembers. Great. A toasty memory bird. Totally normal. This time he doesn't take the familiar path toward the ridge. Instead, he leads you east along the riverbank, frozen solid and glittering beneath a thin crust of midday frost. You pass a cluster of bent pines, their tops twisted, as if trying to point at something they've since forgotten. You walk for over an hour, and then you see it. A grove, nothing grand. Just a ring of trees, short old bark, the colour of ash, limbs bare even in spring. At the centre of the grove stands a low platform made of logs and stone, half buried in ice. You've seen something like it once before, a mortuary platform, a sky burial, but this one is different. There's no body, just objects, bundles of feathers, a broken sled runner, a necklace made from fish vertebrae, and at the very top a stone bowl filled with ice. Perfectly still. You pause. What is this, you ask? Nulok crouches by the platform, brushing frost from one of the stones. A sending place, he says, for names. You nod, slowly, as if that makes perfect sense. He looks at you. You have something to send? You glance down at the bird figurine. It's still warm. You hold it to your chest for a moment. It smells faintly of fire and birch sap. Then you walk to the platform, climb it carefully, and place the bird into the bowl of ice. It doesn't sink. It rests, quiet wings outstretched, waiting. Then Nulok begins to hum, not loudly, just a quiet note, low and steady. You hum too. You don't know why, you just do. The wind picks up. Above, the sky is still pale, but at the edges green flickers have started to gather like moss, curling at the corners of a stone. Nulok stops humming. The bowl trembles. The ice cracks slightly, a hairline fracture, zigzagging toward the edge. And then the bird rocks once and settles. A small breeze kicks up. The feathers on the platform rise and twirl. The broken sled runner shifts slightly in the snow. The fishbone necklace rattles once, then stills. You look at Nulok. He nods. It's gone. You glance up. The aurora isn't quite visible yet, but you feel it, like static in your bones, like something bright, waiting just behind the sky's eyelids. You help him cover the platform again, with a layer of moss and snow. Do you know where the names go, you ask? He shakes his head. Not really. But you believe they get there? He shrugs. They always leave. That's enough. As you walk back to the village, the first threads of light begin to unfurl above long, slow strokes of green and silver. The snow glows faintly. Trees take on shape and movement they didn't have before. Someone once told you the lights are just charged particles from the sun colliding with the Earth's magnetosphere. You don't doubt that. But you also don't care, because sometimes the sky becomes a mailbox, and sometimes it replies. When you return, the old woman is waiting. She's sitting by the fire with a long strip of bark in her hands, scraping it clean with a fishbone blade. She looks at you, not smiling, not frowning, just seeing. "Did it go?" she asks. You nod. "Good," she says. "Now it can be remembered." You sit by the fire, hands outstretched, the smell of spruce and seal fat curling into your clothes. You think about the figurine, about its hollow belly, about what it might have carried. Maybe it wasn't your story. Maybe it was someone else's. Something older, something that needed legs and wings. You realize then, not all rituals are for the living. Not all offerings are for the dead. Some are just messages sent skyward, in case someone is listening. And maybe, just maybe, they are. That night you don't sleep. You lie under furs that smell of pine smoke and old bear fat. Your fingers laced behind your head, your eyes fixed on the faint flickers through the tent flap. The aurora has returned stronger than before. It's green at first, then a rolling wash of pink, then a sudden flash of white, so pale it leaves after images across your eyelids. The lights are telling stories again. You just don't know the language yet. By now, no one explains these things to you. Not because they're secret, but because you're supposed to figure it out by feel. This is not a place of instruction, it's a place of intuition. Just before dawn, a term that feels increasingly theoretical, someone rustles your tent flap.
Not with a call, not even a word, just a hand, an invitation. You get up half-dressed, pulling on your boots with sleepy fingers and following the motion. You recognize the shape outside the old woman, her silhouette hunched, but never weak. She hands you a strip of birch bark rolled into a coil tied with sinew. "What's this?" you ask. "A riddle," she replies, "woven into bark." You blink. Of course it is. She leads you to the edge of camp, to a place where two trees grow from the same root system, twisted together, conjoined like twin dancers. In their fork hangs a small pouch swaying slightly in the wind. She gestures toward it. "Another one," she says. You reach up, untie the pouch. Inside, another coil of bark. You unroll it slowly. This one is marked with symbols, spirals, dots, cross-hatching. No words, not in the sense you recognize, but still, something meant. She watches you like a teacher waiting for the class to realize they're already in the lesson.
What do they mean? She shrugs. What do you feel? You glance down at both bark strips. Their textures are similar. The first has faint scratches on the inner side, as if someone carved it with a bone pin and then rolled it quickly to keep the message safe. The second strip feels older, drier, the ink is faint. "I feel," you say slowly, like one is a question. And the other, she asks. You turn it over, maybe an answer, but not to the same question. She nods once. Good. A riddle woven into bark. Not to be solved, just held. She begins to walk again, and you follow. She speaks as she moves softly, as if afraid the words will break if spoken too loud. Long ago there were those who didn't speak aloud, not out of silence, but because they believed breath was too precious to waste on wrong thoughts. You raise your eyebrows. Sounds exhausting. She chuckles. Maybe, but they became clever with their hands. They'd carve their questions into bark, into bone, into snow, lay them down for others to find. Messages not meant for answers, just understanding. You pause. What kind of questions? She looks at you. The ones that don't have answers. You hold the bark closer. You're beginning to notice the flow of the symbols now, not sentences, but rhythms. A spiral followed by a line, 3 dots, a circle, not logic, pulse. Historians still argue whether these birch bark riddles were coded messages, symbolic calendars, or fragments of oral myths translated into a kind of forest shorthand you say aloud. Because your mind still clings to the modern framing. The old woman hears you and gently smacks your shoulder with the bark. They're poems, she says. Poems, poems with roots, she adds. And that's when she shows you the third one. It's tied to the base of a tree, not visible from the trail, hidden among moss and half-buried snow. You dig gently, hands numb, and pull it free. This strip is older than the others, darkened by time. The symbols have bled into the bark's grain, but one shape remains distinct, a fox running in a spiral tail, raised. Another question you ask. No, she says. You glance at her. That one, she murmurs, is a memory. You sit in the snow and unroll all 3 pieces side by side. A question, a half answer, a memory. The wind picks up slightly. Overhead, the sky stirs. And in the silence, something clicks into place. Not a revelation, not a sudden breakthrough, just a gentle alignment like a note finally played in the right key. You return to camp with the strips bundled tightly tucked inside your cloak. You place them near your sleeping furs and rest your hand on them as if afraid they'll vanish while you sleep. But they don't. They're patient. They've waited this long. That night, you dream of bark strips unfurling in the air, floating upward into the aurora, like smoke made of thought. The lights pulse in time with a rhythm you still don't fully understand. But you're listening. And somewhere in the dark, the question is still being asked. The next day, Nulok appears outside your tent before the snow even finishes its morning whisper. His breath curls like smoke from a resting fire, and his eyes flick toward the tree line. No greeting, just a glance. You've learned that's his version of "Are you ready?" You are. He doesn't say where you're going, only that the fox has run again, which is the kind of statement that might alarm someone new, but you're getting good at this. You follow. The air is crisp, the kind of cold that snaps bark and makes you grateful for every square inch of hide you're wearing. You pass the familiar tree grove with the hanging masks, now quiet again, the toothy one turned toward the ground, as if embarrassed by its own enthusiasm. Nulok moves with purpose. You reach a series of low hills wrapped in wind-stunted spruce. Here the snow is strange, smooth undisturbed except for a very clear trail of tracks. Fox tracks, but they're wrong. Too large, too evenly spaced, too deliberate. You glance at Nulok, fox. He nods. Maybe he crouches near the tracks. Sometimes it's a fox, sometimes it's something pretending to be one. You nod like that makes sense because out here it does. The tracks lead you through a winding path of birch and into a clearing where the snow has been pressed down into a wide spiral. You stand at the edge, uncertain whether to step into it. Nulok doesn't hesitate. He walks straight into the spiral, following the path to its center, where something lies beneath a pile of loose spruce branches. You follow him carefully. At the center is a bundle, fur stitched, closed with sinew. Nulok cuts it open with a flake of obsidian, inside feathers, white ones, dozens, soft and still, perfectly formed, even beneath the weight of snow and time. And beneath the feathers, a mask. It's small, child-sized, painted red, with black lines forming a mouth that curves into a smirk. The eyes are slits, the shape familiar. But here's the thing, you've seen this mask before, on a child in the village. 2 days ago. You tell Nulok. He nods, slowly. Yes. Yes, what? Yes, they've borrowed it before. You blink. He brushes snow from the mask's edges and turns it in his hands. Some masks, he says, aren't made for people. They're made for... In between. You crouch. What's the fox, then? A person? A spirit? Nulok tilts his head. Depends which day you ask. You both sit for a long moment, the spiral beneath you like a quiet maze, a drawing made by someone who never lifted their pen. The story, when it comes, arrives without fanfare. Nulok speaks softly, the way you'd speak to a sleeping animal. There's a tale, he says, of a fox who walked upright. Not always. Just when it had something important to deliver. You nod.
Like mail, he snorts. Like messages, he continues. The fox could cross places no one else could ice, that didn't crack rivers, that didn't freeze. But it only appeared when something was about to be forgotten. It came to remind. You look again at the mask. Remind whoever needs it. He places the mask back in the feathers, folds the bundle closed again. We'll leave it here, he says. Why? Because if the fox wants it, it knows where to find it. You're beginning to understand how stories work here. They're not told, they're lived. They're walked uncovered, fed, and occasionally tricked. Back at the village, the child you saw wearing the red mask plays quietly in the snow, drawing lines with a stick, spirals, circles, shapes that resemble feathers. You pause beside her. Where did you get that mask, you ask gently. She shrugs. I found it. Where? She grins. In a fox dream. That night, the sky flares again.
The lights are wilder now, jagged, twitching fast. A fox run written in color, green spirals, blue darts, a tail of violet across the stars. The dogs bark once sharply, then silence, and in that silence a shape darts across the lake's edge. Small, fast, low to the ground, you lean forward and squint. Fox. Definitely a fox, unless it wasn't. You smile and whisper, thank you. Because whether it delivered a mask, a memory, or just a dream, you got the message. It's early evening and the sun has already forgotten to show up. You're trudging down a familiar slope when Nulok stops beside a small stream. And that's when you realize something strange. The stream is flowing, not bubbling, not choked with slush, flowing. In the middle of a deep Yukon winter, with temperatures so low your breath freezes to your eyelashes, and yet here it is, a narrow ribbon of dark water slicing through the snow like it never got the memo about winter. You crouch beside it, hold your hand out. Steam curls off the surface, gentle, steady. You reach toward it expecting a warm touch. Instead, it's just not cold, not warm either, just somehow unaffected. Nulok doesn't touch it, he just stands there watching. This doesn't freeze, you ask. He shakes his head. Never. You mean in winter? I mean never. You watch the water swirl around a rock the shape of a bird's skull. How he shrugs. Some say a hot spring feeds it from below. Others say it's a doorway. You blink to where he doesn't answer. A raven croaks overhead, circles twice, then lands on a bare spruce branch. It doesn't speak, but it looks like it wants to. You stare at the stream. The way it cuts through snowbanks steaming softly smells faintly of minerals and something sweet, not sugary, sweet like pine sap after fire. The old woman joins you, walking slowly but confidently, staff in hand. She doesn't ask questions, just looks at the stream and nods as if checking on an old friend. This water remembers before the ice, she says. It hasn't forgotten the warmth. You glance up. Is that why it doesn't freeze? She leans closer, examining the water. Some say something sleeps beneath it. Something that breathes heat when the world forgets how. Like an animal, like a watcher. Great. A warm stream guarded by a possibly mythical, subterranean being. Because, of course, she steps back. The people used to leave messages here. You look around, how she points upstream to where a small, flat rock juts from the snow. You follow her gesture and see a series of marks carved into the stone, tiny notches overlapping spirals, and what might be a deer foot or a fish tail or both. They'd carve one symbol before a long journey, she says. So if they never came back, the stream would remember their name. You crouch closer. One spiral is newer, freshly carved, still sharp-edged.
Who made that one, you ask? She looks toward Nulok. He's silent, face turned toward the trees. She did, she says quietly. You glance again. Who? But she doesn't answer. You sit by the water, its soft hiss, constant and low like someone muttering just out of reach. After a while you pull out your knife. She sees it, nods. You crawl to the edge of the stone and begin to carve. Nothing fancy, just a mark. A shape you've been seeing in your dreams. Half a spiral, one straight line, 3 dots beneath it. You don't know what it means, that's fine. The stream will. Later back at camp, someone hands you a bowl of something hot and sweet root mash boiled with snowberries and seal fat. It's oddly delicious, the kind of dish that makes you feel like you've earned the right to keep your toes. The fire burns low, the stars are hidden, but the aurora, it's back. And it's red, not pink, not violet, red. It coils above like a ribbon soaked in rust.
Moves slowly, deliberately. Not dancing. Watching. The villagers sit quietly, each facing a different direction. North, south, east, west, like petals around a flower made of silence. You sit too. The red light pulses. You feel it in your skin. Why is it red? You whisper. The old woman doesn't even open her eyes, because something old is looking. Historians still argue whether rare red aurora displays cause cultural panic or reverence. Some written records say entire villages stayed indoors for days after one. Others suggest the red light marks ceremonies of return, moments when the boundary between worlds became thin enough to walk across. Tonight, no one sings, no one dances, they just sit. And when the red finally fades into a sullen green, there's an exhale, not relief, not fear, just acknowledgement. That night you sleep lightly. Dream of the stream unfrozen and whispering. Dream of the watcher beneath it, curled like smoke humming with heat. Dream of your mark on the stone. And just before waking, the water speaks, not in words, in memory. It says, you came, and that is enough. The morning is soft. Thick snow drapes across the village like a second roof. It muffles even the usual rustle of wakened bodies, the low coughs, the hiss of water warming over the fire. You move slowly, carefully, as if sound itself might shatter. Today a small group is heading out hunters, or what's left of them this season. You're invited to join, not to help, just to see. You follow quietly as they prepare. Bone hooks are checked, leather straps, tightened bows inspected for hairline cracks. Someone ties a small amulet of dried berries and sinew to the front of a sled, protection maybe, or tradition, or both. You set out before the sun even thinks about showing itself. The snow is deeper today, knee-high, powdery, deceptive. It hides dips, holes, and old trails the way a storyteller hides truths in the folds of metaphors. The sled creaks behind you dogs, panting steam into the air. And then suddenly they stop. All of them, dogs, people, even the wind. You scan the landscape, nothing obvious, just trees, snow, silence. But then you see it. Just ahead, half buried in a drift, is a set of antlers. Enormous, curved like the arms of a frozen sea god, each tine coated in frost. The rest of the body is nowhere to be seen, just the crown. The group doesn't move forward, no one makes a sound. Finally, Nulok breaks the silence. Ghost antlers, of course. Should we dig them out, you whisper? No. Why not? He gestures vaguely. They're not there. You stare harder, but they're not supposed to be, he says. That herd died years ago, far west. This one never came this far north. You open your mouth to argue because there they are right in front of you, but then you notice something else. No tracks, no prints, no disturbed snow. The antlers just are. One of the older hunters kneels slowly, pulls out a small bag of ground berries and scatters it toward the antlers. Why the berries, you ask? To be polite, he replies. Sure, obviously. The group moves on, walking around the ghost antlers in a wide arc. No one looks back. You do once. They're still there. Exactly the same, still without tracks, still without explanation. By noon, you reach a clearing near a frozen stream. It's time to eat. Smoked fish is passed around wrapped in birch leaves. It's oily rich and tastes faintly of pine and memory. While chewing, someone leans over and says, I saw the antlers once before. You pause. When years ago, she says. But they weren't here. They were near the coast. You raise an eyebrow. Same shape. She nods. Exactly. I'd know that curve anywhere. Did they vanish then too? She smiles. We didn't wait around to find out. Later, as you prepare to return, Nulok gestures toward the trees. There used to be a trail here, he says. You squint? Used to be? He shrugs. The trees moved, you decide not to ask. The return trip is quiet. The dogs seem nervous, ears flicking at shadows that don't move. At one point, one of them growls soft low, a vibration rather than a sound. You glance to the side. A deer watches you, but not any deer. It's too tall. Its eyes are wrong set, slightly too wide apart. Its fur almost too smooth, too perfect. You freeze. It tilts its head once, then vanishes behind a tree. When you rush forward, it's gone. No prints. Just a faint impression in the snow, like something heavy exhaled there. That night, you ask the old woman about it. She nods, slowly. Sometimes, when the lights speak too long, the old things stir, like the deer, like the memories of them. You frown. You mean they're ghosts, she shrugs, or warnings, or scouts. You think back to the antlers. Historians still argue whether sightings of unnatural animals in Arctic folklore were metaphor hallucination or encoded warnings about migration patterns or climatic shifts. The old woman snorts. They argue because they don't know how to listen to snow. Fair. She hands you a pouch inside crushed berries. Next time you see antlers that shouldn't be there, she says, "Say thank you." You nod, tuck the pouch into your belt. That night, the aurora dances again, but differently. The light moves in sudden jolts like a creature flicking its tail underwater. It flashes in quick pulses, green, violet, green, red. You count the blinks, 13. The old woman sits by the fire carving a new set of antlers into a driftwood panel. You lean closer. "Where did you see them?" you ask. She smiles without looking up. "In a place that didn't exist until it did." It begins with a whisper near the fire, not a voice, not words, just a shift, the kind of sound that happens when too many people suddenly remember something at once. You're sitting beside the hearth, chewing on something that tastes like fish, dreamed of being jerky when the old woman leans in and murmurs, "Tonight," the hearth remembers. You pause. Remembers what she smiles like you just asked her what snow is made of. Secrets, of course. Later the tents empty slowly. People move not in procession but in orbit, drifting toward the central hearth like loose planets pulled in by gravity. No drums this time, no ceremony. Just quiet, thick as seal fat in a stone bowl. Someone stokes the fire. The flames rise tall, lazy, golden. Then she begins to speak. The grandmother, not a grandmother, the grandmother. The one people defer to without deferring. The one whose voice carries more authority than a glacier cracking. She doesn't stand, she doesn't raise her voice, she just speaks. There was a time, she says, when the fire could hear. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. You fed it secrets, she continues, not lies, not gossip. Secrets, real ones, the kind you whisper into moss when you think no one's listening. You glance around, no one laughs, no one blinks. She stares into the flame. You'd take a stone small and round, you'd hold it to your chest, then you'd roll it in your hands, say the thing you couldn't carry anymore. Then you'd place it in the fire. She points. To the edge, not the middle. That part's too hot, too loud. You want the fire to listen, not burn. Someone near the fire pulls out a pouch. It rattles. Stones, they pass it around. One by one, people take a stone and hold it. Some keep theirs pressed to their lips. Others just clutch it in their fists. No one says what they whisper. That's the point. You take one when it comes to you. It's smooth warm from the pouch, heavy in a way that feels personal. You hold it, and you whisper something. Not aloud, not even in words. You just give the stone your secret. Then you place it gently near the flame. It sits there quiet, doesn't crack, doesn't roll, just is. You look around. Dozens of stones, silent confessions glowing in firelight. The old woman nods, satisfied. Sometimes she says the fire keeps the secrets. Sometimes it sends them up. You look into the smoke. You see nothing, then something. Just a flicker, a face, a mask. No, just flame, you tell yourself. Still, the flames snap. The wind stirs. And someone begins to hum, a low tone, barely breath. Others join. The hum thickens, becomes a thread that stitches the people to the fire, to the earth, to the sky. And the fire, it hums back. You feel it in your bones. The smoke curls upward, slow and purposeful, and rises toward the tent's open roof flap. Outside, the aurora shivers to life, not dancing, drifting, like smoke deciding to be light. One of the children tugs your sleeve. She holds out a wooden spoon. It's carved with a spiral on the handle. She says, "You should stir the fire now." You raise an eyebrow. What? She shrugs. so the secrets don't settle too deep. You take the spoon, kneel by the fire, stir the edges, just once, just enough. The stones shift slightly, not all of them, just one. It glows faintly blue, not orange, then returns to stillness. No one notices, or they pretend not to. You hand the spoon back to the girl. She nods solemnly. Thank you. Later, after everyone drifts away, you sit by the dying fire. Alone, one stone remains, yours. Maybe, maybe not. You pick it up. It's cold now, but lighter. You slip it into your pocket, not to keep the secret, just to remember that you let it go. Historians still argue whether hearth rituals in the Yukon served as psychological cleansing, spiritual confession, or communal memory keeping. Here, no one argues. They just stir the fire, let the smoke rise, and trust that the sky can carry a whisper farther than a scream. The path to the cave isn't marked on any hide map or etched into a traveler's memory staff. It's not even whispered about often, not because it's forbidden, but because it's forgotten on purpose, like a dream too heavy to carry into waking. And yet here you are, following Nulok again, obviously through a notch in the ridge where the wind behaves strangely. It doesn't blow, it pulls, like breath in reverse. You're not told where you're going, just that it's a place where the sunrise got lost, because that's a normal thing to say. You walk for hours along a route that twists back on itself more than once, doubling through moss-thick shadows and stretches of deadfall so dense it feels like you're navigating a forgotten alphabet made of trees. The snow is thinner here, oddly crunchy, like it's not quite convinced it belongs. Eventually, the slope steepens, then flattens, then stops, and before you is a hole in the mountain. Not a dramatic one. No gaping maw, just a gap barely taller than a standing child, hidden behind a lean of brush and ice-polished stone. The kind of place you'd overlook unless you already knew. Nulok crouches and lights a small, fat lamp. Not for warmth, for permission. You duck inside. The air shifts instantly. Cold, yes, but ancient cold. Dense, as if layered with the breath of centuries. You feel it in your ears, in your sinuses, in the place between ribs where dreams lodge themselves. The walls are close. You descend. The floor slopes gently, then levels out into darkness that swallows the lamplight almost completely. But then a gleam, soft, orange, not moving. Reflected light. You move closer, and you see them, etchings, hundreds of them, carved into the stone like tattoos on the earth's bones. Spirals, of course, stars, shapes that look like animals or people or both, and handprints. So many handprints. Some are large adult, others so small they could only have belonged to children or something smaller. You press your own hand beside one. The match is close. Too close, no, that would be ridiculous. Still. Nulok speaks softly. They say this cave was found when a hunter chased a fox into it. You smile. Of course they do. But the fox vanished. Let me guess, into the wall. He shakes his head. Into the sunlight. You blink. There's no sunlight in here, you point out. Not anymore. He moves farther in, and that's when you see the center. A dome of stone, not man-made, but worn by wind and water and time into a perfect shell. And in the center of the shell, a hole. A tiny shaft bored upward so narrow only light could fit through. During the solstice, Nulok says the sun passes over this place exactly once. And it shines through that he nods. Only for a few breaths. You crouch beneath it, looking up. It's dark now, but you can feel the shape of the hole can imagine the beam sudden and silent, piercing the gloom for just a moment. They used to bring stories here, he says, to bury them, to seal them, so they could ripen. You run your fingers over one of the carvings. It's old, so old the edges are soft. It depicts a long-legged animal with wings, maybe a crane, maybe not. Below it more spirals, always spirals. You whisper historians still argue whether spiral motifs found in caves this far north were purely symbolic, navigational, or tied to trance state rituals involving sensory deprivation and cold. The stone says nothing. Nulok does. Maybe they were just reminders of what he glances at you, that light doesn't come from above. It returns from below. You sit for a long time, breathing, watching the flicker of the lamp throw your own shadow across a handprint that looks just like yours. Eventually you rise. Before you leave, you add something, not a handprint, not a spiral, just a line. A single mark with no meaning, except the fact that it exists now. The cave accepts it. You follow Nulok out. When you emerge, the sky has changed. A grey-blue hush just before twilight. The trees don't seem to notice you. The snow accepts your steps without complaint. That night you lie in your tent thinking of the cave, of handprints and forgotten sunlight, and you dream, not of flying, not of falling, but of waiting, buried in stone. For the light to return, the weather turns, not in the violent way that tears roofs and sends dogs scrambling, but in the subtle, creeping fashion of a clever lie. One day the snow crunches beneath your boots, the next it sighs, the sky presses low grey and wool thick, and even the fire doesn't crackle the same way. It mutters now, as if annoyed you're still asking it to perform. You're told to stay in, everyone is. It's not a command, more like a nudge, as if the village itself is gently tugging people inward like furs pulled over a sleeping child. So you sit, and you listen. There's a different rhythm in these days, no hunts, no long walks, just the gentle hush of snow against hide, and the occasional creak of someone shifting in their tent, trying not to think too loudly. You wonder if it's cabin fever, but no one else seems bothered. They're waiting for something. You try to ask Nulok what that something is. He just says it's listening season. Oh, right. Obviously the days pass like breath felt not counted. You spend hours with the old woman who is making threads, not ropes, not cords. Threads, fine, delicate lines of sinew and hair, spun with crushed bone dust and something sticky that smells faintly of tree sap and meat. You ask what it's for. Night nets, she says. Fishing. No, you wait for more. It doesn't come until later. She hands you one. Just a single loop of thread no thicker than your finger. Tie it, she says, around your wrist, not tight. Just enough. You do. The thread prickles, itches slightly, then feels warm. She sees your expression. They catch the drifting. You blink. The what now? The parts of you that go wandering while you sleep. Oh, good. Portable soul nets. You sleep uneasily that night. Not because of the net, because the air feels too still. The kind of stillness that suggests something big is breathing nearby, and it's politely holding its breath while you walk past. Your dreams are different now. Not stories, not fears, just places. Places that don't feel made up, that don't feel yours. A ridge you've never seen. A stretch of coast that smells of wet feathers and copper. A tree with a stone mask tied to its trunk, whispering in wind that doesn't move the branches. You wake with a start. The thread is still on your wrist. It's warmer now,
You find the old woman by the fire. She's twisting a new loop. Did it catch anything, you ask? She doesn't look up. You'll know if it didn't. Outside, the weather breaks. Suddenly, harshly. Snow comes sideways, sharp-edged, furious. The tents tremble. One of the dogs howls, then is shushed quickly. You brace the walls with poles and shoulders and prayers. The storm rages all day, all night. And then silence. Real silence, the kind you didn't notice until it ends. The next morning, everything is different. The snow has covered every trace of the past week. The fire pits are buried. The paths are gone. Even the river seems to have lost its place. And overhead, the aurora glows bright white. You step outside in awe. You've never seen white aurora before. It shimmers like silk undulating with a calm that feels earned. Like a storm past and left behind a message in light. Nulok appears beside you, silent. He watches.
You ask softly, "What does white mean?" He doesn't answer right away. Then it means something was heard. You exhale. The old woman appears on your other side. She places a hand on your wrist on the thread. You look down, it's gone. Where it left when it was full, she says. Of what you're not sure, but your dreams that night return to your own memories finally. You see your first day here, the cold, the ache, the dog's impatient feet, the stars like flecks of ice across black wool. And you dream that the sky leans down gently and places a thread in your hand, a gift for listening. Historians still argue whether certain Inuit or Dene traditions involved physical charms to anchor the dreaming self, or if such notions are romantic projections from later ethnographers. They can argue you know what warmth feels like on your wrist in the dark, in the days after the white aurora time folds in on itself. Not like a book closing, but like fur-lined inside-out soft secrets suddenly closer to the skin than you expected. The village is quieter now, not solemn, not fearful, just inward-facing. People hum to themselves more, stir food without eating, tend fire for the fire's sake. You don't ask what's changed, because you feel it too. Nulok finds you near the edge of camp where the trees begin to lean against each other like old men at the end of a story. He gestures for you to follow. No words, just the flick of his fingers and the certainty in his steps. You walk. The path is strange today, familiar trees in the wrong places. Or maybe you've just never looked at them this way. The snow crunches differently. Your boots sink deeper. There's no wind, but every so often a branch above you sighs, dropping a single flake that lands with impossible precision on your nose. Eventually you arrive at a clearing you swear wasn't there last week. At the center, a circle of stones, each one blackened by fire, cracked, lichen-kissed. You start to ask what they are, but Nulok speaks first. Sit. You sit. He does the same opposite you, hands on his knees, eyes soft but alert. After a moment he takes a pouch from his belt and spills its contents onto the snow. Tiny bones, bird maybe, or fish. They clatter like teeth. You raise an eyebrow. He doesn't explain. Instead he arranges them. Not into a picture but a pattern. Crooked, spiraling uneven, but clearly meant. Reading bones, you whisper. He nods, but not for seeing, for listening, of course, because hearing what the bones say is far more restful than knowing what they mean. He begins to tap the bones with the sliver of antler. Once, twice. Then he stops, listens, then taps again. It goes on like this for minutes. Then he looks up at you. They say something shifting, where you ask. He tilts his head, not a place. You let that hang in the air a while. Then gently, you pick up one of the bones. It's so light it feels fake, like something carved from hardened breath. You hold it to your ear, and you swear it hums. Not a sound, a memory of one. The old woman arrives at the edge of the clearing. She's holding a bundle wrapped in sealed skin and tied with hair. She lays it in the snow beside you, unwraps it. Inside teeth, not human. Bear, maybe. Wolf. Something old. They've been carved, painted, etched, with faint symbols, crosses, dots, forked lines that echo the stars. These, she says, are for speaking. To the bones, to the sky. Nulok stands, picks up one of the carved teeth and holds it aloft. Not offering, not threatening, just showing. The aurora isn't visible right now, but the sky still seems to listen. He places the tooth back down next to the bones. The first people, the old woman says softly, believed the sky watched through the bones of animals. That light poured into the land through their skulls. You blink. That's poetic. She shrugs. Also true. Historians still argue whether these practices were symbolic invocations of the hunt methods of ancestral memory, or simply ways to pass long winters with stories that felt real. She glances at you. What's the difference? You sit with that a moment. Then you say, "What are they saying now?" She smiles. They're asking if you're ready for what. She looks up. The clouds part just a little, and the faintest glow of green begins to spread across the sky. They want you to tell them something. She whispers. You pick up the lightest of the bones. It quivers in your hand. You whisper to it, not a fact, not a plea, just a feeling, something you haven't shared, not even with yourself. Then you lay it back in the snow. Nulok nods, and you all sit in silence again, waiting for the reply. Later that night, the wind changes. It comes from the west, now soft and slow. The dogs sleep heavily. The children don't talk in their dreams. You step outside and see the aurora bend in a way it hasn't before, curved like a hand curled into a gentle fist, as if holding something. Not threatening, just holding. Maybe a story, maybe yours. There's a rule here no one tells you out loud, but it becomes clear when the birds return. You listen, not because they bring messages, but because their silence has been so long it echoes. And now at last, a sound. One morning, just as the fire crackles to life and someone stirs a pot of something rooty and beige, a trill pierces the air. Sharp, curious, bright as bone against sky. A bird, not a flock, just one. Perched high on a pine feather's fluffed head, cocked like it's surprised to see the world still here. You look up. So does everyone else. No one speaks. Nulok eventually mutters. It came early. The old woman narrows her eyes, or everything else is late. By midday there are more, 5, maybe 6. Small things, dark feathers and pale bellies hopping between branches like nervous messengers, unsure where to land. They chirp in short bursts, pause, often stare at nothing. You wonder if they're confused or just listening like everyone else. That evening, the village gathers near the fire, not for ritual, not for decision, but for a kind of checking in. No words needed. People sit, share food, let the birds flit in and out of trees like punctuation marks. The old woman produces a cloth bundle, inside feathers, bundles of them sorted by color, length, curve. She passes them around and each person takes one. You do too. Yours is white at tip, black at the root. Short, from a wing maybe. What's it for, you ask? She smiles. Message memory. Meaning? You tie it to a story, and if it flies, the story gets carried. You blink, of course. Story feathers. Because why wouldn't you bind a narrative to plumage and trust the sky to deliver it? She helps you tie a tiny loop of sinew around the quill threads, a bead through it, smooth and amber, and hands it back. Now think, she says, not about what you know, about what you wish you didn't forget. You hold the feather gently. You think. You remember the spiral in the snow, the stream that never froze, the cave, the net on your wrist, the ghost antlers. But mostly you remember the moment the fire shifted, not when you fed it, but when it looked back. You press the bead to your lips, whisper nothing, then tie the feather to a branch near the fire. You're not the only one. Dozens of feathers dangle there now like a forest of forgotten prayers fluttering in invisible wind. That night, the wind does rise. A low hush at first, like the trees stretching, then stronger, sharper. The feathers dance. One of them breaks loose, soars. People watch it go. No one follows. The old woman sighs. There it goes. You glance at her. Which story was it? She shrugs. Not mine. Historians still argue whether the use of feathers in northern tradition symbolized descent of the soul weather divination or the simple tracking of seasonal shifts. But hear their stories, flight-bound, unfinished. When you wake the next morning, more feathers are gone. A storm has passed, or arrived. Hard to say. The ground is littered with new prints, bird feet, sharp, close, curious, not from the night birds, different ones. You see something nestled in a drift near your tent, a feather, not yours, long, pale, marked with a black spiral. You hold it up. It's cold, but not empty. You bring it to the old woman. She examines it, nods slowly. That one's full. Of what she hands it back. Listen to it. So you do. That night you lie with the feather beside your bedroll. It doesn't sing, doesn't glow. But in your dreams, a bird with eyes like stars circles once, then drops something small and glowing into your palm. You never see what it is. You just know. It belonged to a memory that wasn't yours but somehow remembered you. You're standing in the middle of the village when the ground hums. Not shakes, not rumbles, hums. Just a low vibration, like someone tuning a drum 2 valleys away. Subtle, gentle, bone deep. Everyone pauses, but no one panics. One of the dogs lifts its head ears, twitching. A child presses their palm to the ground and grins. It's awake. Someone murmurs, "You don't know what it is. You don't ask. You just listen." The old woman appears beside you, bundled tighter than usual, her eyes brighter than firelight. "You're ready," she says. You frown for what she cocks her head. The remembering, you pause. Haven't we been doing that this whole time? She grins toothless and full of amusement. That was the introduction, wonderful. She takes your hand, not roughly, not sweetly, just firmly, like someone guiding you down a hallway you didn't know was there. She leads you past the tents, past the fire, past the tree with all the story feathers now stripped bare, but for one small knot of sinew fluttering like it still remembers what was tied to it. You walk beyond the village edge into the trees. The air is thick here, heavy but not ominous, like breath held in reverence. She stops before a ring of standing stones, short, thick, moss-covered. They form an uneven circle, broken in places like a sentence left unfinished. She steps into the circle. You follow. The moment your foot crosses the threshold, everything sharpens. Sounds clarify. Snowflakes fall slower. Even your breath feels louder. This, she says, is where they stored the sky. You blink. You mean stories. She shakes her head. No, the sky. You look up. Just clouds. Grey. Passive. Where is it now? She touches her chest. Then yours. Some of it here. Some of it waiting. She kneels, brushes snow from the center of the circle. There's something beneath. A carving spirals, of course, but with a twist. This one forms a path, a maze, not a trap, a journey. You sit beside her. She places both hands on the stone, closes her eyes, and starts to hum. It's low, old, a melody made of breath and memory. You hum too. It comes naturally. The ground vibrates again, just a little. You feel, open, like someone removed a door from your chest. The hum grows and you see it, not with eyes, with memory. You see ancestors, yours or not, who knows, walk in this same circle, placing stones, drawing lines, humming, always humming. Watching the sky pulse and drop light into the earth like seeds. You see them burying feathers in hollow logs, wrapping bones in sinew and whispering names into the knots. You see one of them look up just like you and whisper, "We remember." The circle fades. You're still sitting. But your hands are warm now, too warm for snow. You look down. A feather lies across your palms, white, long, smooth, new. Where did this you begin? But the old woman is gone. You're alone. The wind stirs. A raven circles overhead, once, then disappears. You step out of the circle. Everything is unchanged and yet not. The village looks the same, but the people notice. They glance at you as you return, not surprised, just aware. Nulog nods once. That's a remembering feather, he says. You hold it up. What do I do with it? He grins. Don't forget. Historians still argue whether spiral stone circles in subarctic regions were solstice observatories, community gathering spaces, or spiritual mnemonic devices designed to encode oral traditions. You don't argue, you remember. That night the aurora returns in full strength. Green first, then gold, then white, again clean, slow, majestic. It doesn't flicker, it flows, like a river poured gently over the earth. You hold the feather in your hand and watch the light thread itself across the sky. And for the first time you don't wonder what it means. You just let it speak. The village is quiet today, but not from weariness. It's the stillness of something finishing its sentence. You feel it before you know it, the way the dogs lie in perfect silence, ears perked but relaxed. How the fire burns without crackle, just a low, even breath. How the wind seems to walk rather than run. You sit near the center of the village holding your feather, and the old woman approaches. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't offer instructions. She just places something in your lap, a pouch, worn, soft. You open it, inside are teeth, again, but these are different, smooth, almost polished by time. Some of them carved with deep notches, others left untouched. You recognize one. It looks just like the tooth Nulok lifted skyward near the spiral stones. You glance up. These are songs, she says. Ah, of course, bone songs. She sits beside you slowly, carefully, pulls one tooth from the pouch and holds it against her cheek. She closes her eyes, and she sings, not with words, not with melody, but with sound, humming low, letting the shape of the tooth guide the shape of the sound. You try the same. It feels strange at first, personal, silly even, but the longer you hold the bone, the more it pulls from you a note that feels less like yours and more like borrowed. Like something handed to you by a voice older than language. Others begin to join, not a choir, just a layering of tones, some high, some deep, some like breath, caught between dreams. No one tries to match, they add. And the teeth, They vibrate, only slightly, but enough to know they're not just being held, they're listening. The sound swells not in volume but in presence. The air thickens. Your chest feels like it's pressing against a gentle tide. Then it stops. No signal, no cue, just silence. The kind that settles like snow, soft and complete. The old woman opens her eyes. That was a remembering, she says, of what she smiles, what came before language. You glance down at the tooth. It's warmer now and somehow heavier. You slip it into your pouch. Nulok appears with a bowl of something steaming. He passes it to you. You sip hot broth, strong and bitter, with a touch of sweet root. It tastes like bark and endings. You ask, why do the teeth remember? He shrugs. Maybe because they're the last part of us that stays. You pause. That's actually kind of beautiful. He smirks. It's also practical. Teeth are tough. Fair point. The day continues dreamlike. Children run through the snow, dragging long sticks behind them to draw lines and circles. Spirals again. Always spirals. A few feathers are tied to their belts, bouncing as they move. One of them stops beside you. She holds out a bone, small, carved. She says this one wants to go with you. You raise an eyebrow. It told you that. She grins, not with words. You accept it. Etched into its side is a wave pattern, gentle, rolling. You pocket it with care. That evening, the old woman gathers a few people near the fire. Not many, just the ones who've heard certain things. You're among them now. She speaks slowly. There's a story, she begins, about how the sky once came too close to the earth. It tried to lie down to rest, but the land wasn't ready, so the sky turned to bones, and the bones turned to teeth, and the teeth scattered, where she shrugs. Everywhere, anywhere, in fish and stone, in bird and man, and once a generation they hum. You hold the bone gently, you hum again, just once, soft. It answers, not loudly, just enough. Historians still argue whether Inuit bone artifacts, especially marked and carved teeth, were ornamental, mnemonic, or ritualistic instruments for vibration-based storytelling. Let them argue. Tonight the sky pulses in rhythm. The aurora flutters steady and low, like it's listening. And the fire doesn't burn, it sings. Tonight the tents are empty, not from fear, not abandonment. Everyone is simply outside, even the babies, bundled like root vegetables cradled against fur-wrapped chests. The aurora arrived early before the sun had even given up, and it has not left. It hangs above the village like a slow-breathing animal stretched from ridge to ridge. Green, yes, but also with streaks of blue, flickers of red, and the occasional sudden pulse of something white-hot and silent. You sit among the others in the snowbacks, resting against logs and sleds and each other. Someone hands you a cup. You sip without asking. It tastes of bark and sweetness, juniper and mystery.
A low drum starts, no ceremony, just rhythm, then something stranger. The dogs start to howl, not all at once, not in panic, just in chorus, like they've agreed on a key in advance. High, low, syncopated, harmonizing with the sky. And no one stops them. In fact, someone joins in, an elder face painted with ash, an ochre mouth forming long, vowel-shaped tones that blend with the dogs like wind threading through reeds. You don't know what's happening, but you do. Because your body knows. Your breath changes, slower, deeper. You press your palm to the snow. It's cold, yes, but somehow alive. The flakes vibrate beneath your hand, responding. Then the old woman stands, and everything shifts. She lifts her arms not in praise or drama, just a gesture of offering. And the lights respond, they bend. Downward, you feel it. Everyone does. The air thickens, not with pressure, but with attention, as if something vast and ancient has finally turned to look at you fully.
Not as prey, not as guest, just as a listener. She speaks, not loudly, not in a language you understand, but every word sinks into the ground like a seed dropped with care. You don't dare move, you don't even blink. Then she stops. She lowers her arms. The dogs fall silent. The wind hushes, and the sky lifts like a curtain closing. Everyone remains still for a moment longer. Then slowly people begin to breathe again. Shift, murmur. You turn to Lulled. What was that? He exhales like someone finishing a very old sentence. That was the whisper's return. You nod, because what else can you do? A child tugs your sleeve. Did you see it? You kneel, see what the shape. You frown. What shape? The thing inside the light. You pause. What did it look like? She holds up a stick. Draws in the snow, a curve, then another, a spiral, a line through it, a handprint, a mask. You stare at it. I've seen that you whisper. She nods. It watches. From where she shrugs. Everywhere. Later, as you curl beneath your furs, you remember the carving in the cave, the feather in your dream, the warmth on your wrist, the stone that sang, the teeth that hummed. You realize it's not that the ancestors watched the sky for signs, it's that the sky watched back. It still does. Historians still argue whether northern peoples believed the aurora borealis to be sentient or merely sacred. Some accounts suggest it was treated as a soul mirror, others as a divine threshold. You lie awake, staring through the flap of your tent at the last slow shimmer of green curling, like a dream that refuses to fade. And you wonder if the lights whispered to them. What did they whisper back? The morning arrives, soft and slow with light that feels like it's apologizing for being late. No fanfare, no ceremony, just gentle snowlight filtering through the hide of your tent, casting pale ripples on the floor, like echoes of the aurora, now sleeping above. You rise. Your joints creak a little more than usual, not from age, from weight, but not the heavy kind. The kind of weight you feel after being trusted with something precious. Outside the village is already moving, quietly, thoughtfully, like a well-rehearsed play performed with reverence instead of flair. The elders are gathered at the hearth. The children sit cross-legged in the snow, forming a ragged semicircle. Something is about to happen. You approach. Lulled sees you and pats the snow beside him. You join without asking. The old woman stands at the center. She holds a bundle, wrapped in bark tied with sinew. When she speaks, her voice is firmer than usual, not louder but more present. This, she says, is the bundle of forgetting. Several of the children gasp. You wait. She continues. Inside are stories no longer needed, memories that have finished their walk, names that wish to sleep. She lifts the bundle gently and lays it into the fire. The bark curls, the sinew snaps, the smoke rises grey at first, then tinged with a faint, strange blue. Everyone watches, no one says a word. Eventually she turns back to the group. Now she says we make room. A long silence follows, not empty, expectant, and one by one people begin to speak. Short phrases, just a few words each. I release her name. I return the hunger. I forget the cold. I let the river keep that day. You don't understand all of them, but you understand the shape. letting go. You close your eyes, you speak, not aloud, not even in your mouth. You say something inside, something that's been riding your ribs like a passenger, and you let it go. You feel it leave, like steam from skin. The fire accepts it. Later, someone offers you a piece of charcoal.
You frown. For what? The old woman smiles, to mark what you've left behind. You take it, find a stretch of hide near your tent, draw one shape, a spiral broken at the center. Not perfect, not pretty, but real. The child from the other night comes up beside you. She draws next to yours a feather with an eye at its root. You look at her. She grins, says nothing. That evening, the village sings, not in unison, not choreographed, just threads of melody winding through tents, fires, soup pots, and sleeping dogs, lullabies, fragments, one line from here, two lines from there. Together they form a soundscape too gentle to be called music. It's more like breathing. And as the sun sets behind the mountains, the sky glows faintly, not with aurora, but with the long gold of twilight that seems to linger a bit too long, as if reluctant to stop watching. You sit by the fire, hold your feather, turn it slowly. It hums once in your hand and is still.
Historians still argue whether acts of ritual forgetting in Arctic communities served a psychological purpose, a metaphysical one, or were simply an expression of cyclical story-keeping, letting go so new stories could grow. You don't argue, you remember, and you forget at once, because some things are too full to carry forever, and others are only meant to be held for a little while, then scattered softly, like snow blown from an open hand. In the low amber light of late winter, everything takes on a dreamlike hush, as though the world has been wrapped in the memory of warmth, and even time steps gently so it won't disturb the snow. You wake slowly. No urgency. No sound but the faint rustle of hide and the breath of sleeping dogs. You pull on your boots, step outside. And there it is, a path, not made by feet or sleds, but by light, pale green, barely visible in the air, a soft line stretching from the village edge into the trees, thin as spider silk, steady as thought. You glance at Nulok, who has appeared behind you, like he always does when something weird happens before breakfast. "What is it?" you whisper. He shrugs. Trail. To where he smiles. Where it ends. Thanks, very helpful. You follow, because of course you do. The path doesn't cut through the forest. It weaves around trees, across a narrow stream you don't remember being there yesterday, past a boulder shaped eerily like a crouching bear. As you walk, the light shifts, deepens. Now it's blue-green, then soft gold, then almost invisible. You blink, you're in a clearing. At the center is a stone, not large, not carved, but deeply familiar. The kind of stone that doesn't announce itself but remembers you. You step closer, it's warm. In the snow, in the shade, in the cold, you kneel. There's something on top, a bundle wrapped in soft bark, tied with feather. You untie it slowly, inside a mask carved from driftwood, painted with streaks of black and red. Eyes closed, mouth open in a small O, not shock, not fear, just listening. You lift it. It fits your hand, too perfectly. You glance around. No one's there, but you feel seen. You don't put it on, not yet. Instead, you hold it to your chest, and the clearing shifts, not physically, just in attention, as if everything, the trees, the wind, the faint light, hanging in the air, leans closer. And for a moment, you hear the whisper, not a word, Not a phrase, just a knowing, like a voice deep beneath snow saying yes. You breathe out. Place the mask gently back in the bark. Wrap it, tie the feather again. You leave it on the stone because it was never yours, just waiting for you. You return to the village in time for stew. No one asks where you went. The old woman passes you a cup, smiles. Later that night, the aurora returns in full. This time it's different. It arcs overhead like a bridge. Not a flat shimmer, but a shape. A walkway. A path from horizon to horizon. And one by one people gather outside. They don't speak, they don't sing, they just look. And in their faces you see something new. Not awe, not fear, but recognition. As if they remember building that bridge with their ancestors plank by whispering plank. Someone raises a hand, not to wave, to mirror the shape. You do too. Your fingers glow faint green. The old woman whispers, "They're coming closer." Who, you ask? She shrugs. The ones who remember us. Historians still argue whether the northern lights were interpreted as spirits of ancestors, messages from gods, or celestial reflections of earthly fires. But no one argues here. They just stand still, under a sky that listens as much as it speaks. And you understand now the whisper isn't a sound, it's a connection, a thread, and tonight it's pulled tight. There's a smell in the air this morning that you've never smelled before. Not smoke, not snow, not food. It's older than all of those. It smells like stone turning to dust, like warmth breaking through ice, like someone remembering your name before you were born. You follow it without meaning to. Past the tents, beyond the spiral trees, into a shallow ravine where the sun rarely reaches. And there you find it, a figure. Not human, not animal, carved in ice. A sculpture, no, a shape left behind. Kneeling, head bowed, hands cupped, holding something you can't see. You crouch, touch the hand, it's melting, but only slightly, like it wants to stay. You hear a crunch behind you. Nulok appears, again out of nowhere, like a particularly stoic ghost with strong calves. What is this, you ask? He tilts his head. Some say it's the first listener. You nod, slowly. And others, they say it's you. Great. Identity crises in frozen ravines. You reach toward the thing in the cupped hands. There's nothing there, but your fingers tingle anyway, warm, electric, ancient. What did it use to hold you, whisper? Nulok shrugs, the last whisper. And where did it go? He smiles. You just heard it. The ice begins to crack, not shatter, not fall, just soften, release. A line appears down the figure's back, then one across the shoulder. And before your eyes it begins to lean, to fold, not like a statue melting, like a person kneeling after a long prayer. You step back. It sinks gently into the snow. Gone. Just a pool of cold where reverence used to sit. No one speaks. You and Nulok return to the village in silence. And now something's different. You see it in every face. Not fear, not confusion, just understanding, as if something unspoken has finally been acknowledged. That evening the old woman gathers a small group by the fire. You're one of them. She unwraps a bundle. Inside, bark, scrolls.
You didn't even know bark could be written on, but here they are. Softened, smoked, etched with charcoal and pigment. Spirals, of course, symbols you almost recognize. She passes them around, one per person. Yours is marked with a crescent. You stare at it. Read it, she says. You open your mouth, pause, and then you do, not out loud, just inward. And it's not reading, it's remembering. A voice rises in your head, low and steady, telling you a story you've never heard, but know by heart. About a hunter who became snow, about a raven that flew backward, about a river that swallowed time and spat out light. You glance up. Everyone else is still, eyes closed, hands on their scrolls, and the fire, it's blue, just for a moment. You blink. It's orange again, but your scroll is warmer now. You roll it up. Tie it with sinew. Keep it close. Later, someone starts a drum. The rhythm is slow, not celebratory, more like footsteps on a long road.
People begin to hum, not songs, just presence. You join in, eyes on the sky. The aurora doesn't dance tonight. It drapes, heavy, still, like a curtain drawn gently across a stage. Historians still argue whether bark-etched scrolls found in subarctic regions were used for storytelling, record-keeping, or spiritual initiation rites, especially when associated with auroral phenomena, but you know better now. They were reminders that stories aren't just told, they arrive, and tonight, one has just landed right in your hands. Snow falls again, but this time it's not hiding anything, it's soft, fat flakes, the kind that hush the world rather than bury it. You stand near the fire pit now, nothing more than a gentle mound under white. Around you, people move slowly, not busy, just thoughtful. You haven't seen the old woman all morning. You ask Lulled. She left before dawn, he says, went to listen. Will she come back? He shrugs. She always does. But his voice has that thin edge of reverence people reserve for questions they don't want to answer fully. You wander, not far, just far enough to feel alone. You find yourself by the river again. The ice is still thick, but the top layer glistens wet now, kissed by the promise of melt. You kneel, press your palm to it and wait. There it is, a pulse. Not from the river, from below, like the earth itself exhaling through layers of time. You lean in, close your eyes, and finally you hear it. The whisper, not loud, not clear, but undeniably there. And it says something you don't translate, you don't need to. It's not a message, it's a mirror. You sit with it, let it echo, and then you whisper back. Your words disappear into the ice. Maybe they reach someone. Maybe they reach you from long ago. You return to the village just before dusk. The fire is lit. The people have gathered. No one speaks. Instead, they pass a bowl. Each person adds something small, a carved bead, a twist of bark, a feather stub, a scrap of red thread. When it comes to you, you place your bark scroll inside. Not to discard it, to complete it. You pass the bowl. It disappears into the fire. No flare, no smoke, just a deeper warmth. Someone begins a soft chant, one you've heard before, one you now know, and then stillness, the kind of stillness that needs no explanation. You lie down that night with the memory of the stone circle, the spiral paths, the light trails, the bone songs, and that one feather that never returned. And for the first time in all your days here, your dreams are silent, but not empty. They are full of color, of movement, of knowing. They swirl like the aurora, but hold the weight of a story that no longer needs to be spoken. Historians still argue whether the northern lights were sacred sentient, or simply the ultimate metaphor in a world too vast to tame. But you don't argue, you dream. And the whisper dreams with why now. Let everything slow. Let the rhythm of your breath become gentler, softer, like snow settling over a sleeping world. The fire you watched is now just a quiet ember in the dark, glowing, with the memory of all the stories it held. The feather rests beside it, its tip barely moving in the hush of night air. Somewhere beyond the trees, the aurora still lingers, no longer dancing, just resting, stretched across the sky, like a blanket pulled gently over the earth's shoulders. You remember the stones beneath your hands, the bone that hummed, the path made of light, the river that whispered without words. Let those memories drift now. Let them float like ice on quiet water. There is nothing you need to hold tightly now. No name to recall, no step to retrace. Just this moment, still soft present. Breathe in and out. If you listen closely beneath the rhythm of your own heartbeat, you might still catch it. That whisper.
Not from the sky, but from you, the part of you that is always listening, always remembering, always waiting for silence deep enough to speak from. So now, rest. Let the fire go out. Let the snow fall. Let the night carry you. You are safe. You are part of the story now. And the sky remembers always. End of script. Sweet dreams.